Well,
I'm just saying.
good evening, everyone.
Recording in progress.
Thanks so much for joining us this evening for the Tuesday, November 15th Louisville City Council meeting. I call the meeting to order and ask our city clerk for a roll call.
Mayor Stolzman?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
Here.
Councilmember Brown?
Here.
Councilmember Dickinson?
Here.
Councilmember Fahey?
Here.
Councilmember Lay?
Here.
Councilmember Most?
Here.
Thank you, everyone. Will you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you, everyone. Could I get a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Is there a second? Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thanks, everyone. That takes us to our public comment period for items that are not on our agenda tonight or items that are only on our consent agenda. If there are any members of the public that would care to comment on items not on our agenda, please let us know by raising your hand at this time, or if you're in person, you can come up to the podium and tell us what you'd like to tell us, and then afterward, if you'll fill out a sign-up card. Did you have a comment on items not on the agenda? Oh, great, please. And then each person during public comment periods tonight will have 3 minutes to tell us what they'd like to tell us. Director Zucchero, if you could turn on the mic on the lectern for us, that'd be great. And then just tell us your name and the city you live in and what you'd like to tell us.
Sure. Hi, I ran from my office. My name is Matt Berry. I'm at 740 Garfield Avenue, and I'm here on behalf of the Building Code Board of Appeals. My comments are regarding the current adopted 2021 IECC, including Appendix RC, but should be obvious that they can be applicable to any contemporary discussion of the codes. We weren't invited to participate in any work sessions when you're contemplating Appendix RC, nor were we included in any of the early discussions regarding the commercial equivalent Appendix CC. We're concerned that you have not utilized the collective experience of your boards, committees, or your building department staff in seeking to adopt these codes and modifications. It should be noted to everyone that the building code additions are marked by a year, but they're not intended to be in sync with the current calendar year. There's a misconception for those outside of the building industry that the adopted code year is supposed to match the current year. We're not behind. As engineers, architects, and builders, we love efficiency. We care about the environment and our carbon footprint. I was just at a seminar about embodied carbon within concrete. I'm a structural engineer. It's an important part of our industry that we're putting into our practice. We're looking at this holistically, and the passing of these code-exceeding codes are actually a step forward and 2 steps back. As a whole, these building code appendices, RC and CC, are way ahead of manufacturers' products, both in their availability and long-term durability, to be able to reliably perform at their published efficiency rates. As we're proceeding to design, permit, and build projects under Appendix RC, you should all be aware that the efficient heat pumps are not able to keep up in colder temperatures. Their efficiency lags, and on days like today, they even require backup heating systems. Ironically, the most efficient is a gas-fired furnace. The other option is electric resistance heating, which works just like your hair dryer. And their products are better than before, but they're not ready for large-scale deployment. So for every new super efficient heat pump being installed, a much less backup system is also being installed. I just want to inform everyone of that. Availability of this equipment is slim and delayed, and it's not a COVID-related supply chain problem. The codes are just ahead of the available products. The meters are not available. Our own board member purchased one of the few remaining electric meters compatible with the current code on eBay for a 600% premium so he could secure it for his own house rebuild. Excel doesn't have these available.
Thank you for your comments.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments on items not on the agenda this evening? Seeing none, that takes us to our consent agenda. Could I get a motion to approve? Mayor Pro Tem Maloney.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion of consent agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, everyone. That takes us to our council informational comments on pertinent items not on the agenda. Just first want to comment on the customer satisfaction survey approval contract that we just passed on the consent agenda. We've gotten a lot of feedback over the course of our contract on our waste hauling service, and so I'm really proud of the council and the staff for being proactive about doing some customer satisfaction surveys going into the process of rebidding and just getting as much information as we can. So for folks who want to provide information, there'll be a statistically valid way of providing that, and so if you get the survey in the mail, please respond. And then I just wanted to call everyone's attention. You'll see there's a plaque on the door behind me, and I just noticed it at this meeting, so I think we got it very, very recently. So you'll see it says Dave Lee Broadcast Room, and Dave was with the city for a long time doing the broadcast for all of us, and he lived here in town, and he spent tons and tons of nights with us, late nights, helping us with the video and everything, and he had an untimely passing. But it's really wonderful to see us honor him with that plaque and just the work that he did for all of us in the community and the many, many hours he spent helping us and really helping us with transparency and community participation. So I just want to call everybody's attention to that this evening. Any other council comments on items not on the agenda? Councilmember Lay.
Wouldn't we be remiss if we didn't recognize that you were elected last Tuesday as our new county commissioner?
Thanks,
With almost
Councilmember Lay.
80% of the vote, I think. Congratulations.
Thanks so much. That takes us to our city manager's report.
Thanks, Mayor. I only have one item, and that is our police chief, Dave Hayes, is going to be leaving us and going to Estes Park. His last day will be sometime the week of Thanksgiving. Still arm wrestling with him over that date. He wants to work forever. You know Dave. He's been such an asset to the community, to the organization. He's done so much for the community. We're going to miss him dearly. And we will be having an open house in appreciation of him on Monday the 21st at 4 till 6 p.m. over at the police department. So thank you, Dave.
Thank you so much. All right, that takes us to our regular business. First, we have an equity, diversity, and inclusion strategies update. I'll turn it over to the city manager to introduce staff for the presentation.
Assistant City Manager Hogan will be covering this one.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Staff is presenting an update on the city's equity, diversity, and inclusion strategies. The 2022 Council Work Plan includes the ongoing implementation of the final recommendations from the 2021 Community EDI Task Force. The recommendations from the task force focus on external or community-wide EDI efforts. Additionally, the city completed an internal equity assessment and developed an EDI blueprint to focus on internal or organizational efforts. Staff previously shared memos with Council in March and October regarding the work completed around cultural recognition and language justice. Tonight's update represents the continuation of this work. I'll share an update on a few items, but there's much more detail included in staff's memo. The first item is the creation of a dedicated EDI position within the organization. One of the recommendations from the task force is creating an EDI position within the city. Staff has developed a job description based on the needs of the organization and similar positions that we've seen in other municipalities. This position will lead and advance EDI efforts of the city, both internally within the organization and externally within the community. Staff is currently evaluating effective recruitment strategies for the position and anticipates posting the position and hiring a qualified candidate as soon as possible. The next item is translation and interpretation, which focuses on language justice. We've worked on a number of improvements related to this, focused around improving public accommodations and equitable access to city services. These include installing new welcome signs at all city facilities and translating city communications like the community update newsletter, the Recreation and Senior Center catalog, and monthly utility bill inserts. We've also added an assistive technology to the city's website that helps provide website accessibility for users. We've also launched Language Line at public-facing facilities, which allows for on-demand language interpretation in Spanish and additional languages, which can be accessed via mobile, video, or phone. And interpretation at public meetings continues to be available upon request. Lastly, the city has formed an internal EDI committee that is comprised of members or representatives from all departments and divisions. And the focus of this committee is to accomplish the goals and strategies outlined in the internal EDI blueprint. The committee's work is largely focused on 6 different focus areas. They are inclusion, education, policies, celebrations, talent planning, and continued EDI dialogue. The city has budgeted approximately $70,000 to complete this work, in addition to the salary and benefits and basic operational needs for the EDI staff person. This does not account for additional budgeted EDI efforts related to programs and events and learning and development, which has been included within the appropriate city program areas. Additional budget requests may be considered once the EDI program manager is on board and has had time to evaluate the work that's been completed to date and the work that's remaining. This is just a snapshot of the work completed by many people over the course of the last year, and we look forward to continuing these efforts. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any council member questions? Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
Thank you. Thank you. Let's see, Assistant City Manager. Remembering all these titles is tough for me. You know, one of the things that is in the staff report, which I very much appreciate, is on page 131, and it's really the recommendations, short-term actions, and so forth. And these all look spot on. The one thing that I wonder about, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but when we do this again, it would be good to know if we have some measurable way of understanding the impact of doing those things. Now, I recognize that some of them that are in here, whether it be an art exhibit or something, it's hard to understand the impact. You know, we could say that so many people went into the library and experienced this or something like that, but anything we can do to help us be better at the purpose of this program, and that would be something that I would really look forward to over time. And you know, as you know, with the KPIs and other things that you work on, those are, I don't want to go that deep with this, but I hope you understand my intent of just making sure that we're hitting the mark with the program. And I think what we're doing so far is terrific. So thank you for the report.
Councilman?
Yes, and that's something we've talked about within the internal EDI committee, is establishing metrics and maybe assessing that baseline knowledge around EDI. So I'm certain that'll be a continued discussion and decision point internally and externally.
Councilmember Fahey?
Thank you. Yes, I want, first, thanks, staff. I think what you've already accomplished is really significant and helpful, clarifies a lot of things for a lot of people. The one thing I want, and I'm not sure if this is exactly the right place to bring this up, but there's been some discussion about whether it should be EDI or DEI, and I want to suggest that at another meeting for another organization, another town in Colorado has added a J for justice at the beginning of EDI, which translates into an acronym of JEDI. I don't know if that's too funny, but it also kind of asserts a strength and a warrior kind of feel for, we take this seriously and we're going to do something. So I don't know if we want to change our acronym. So that was all.
Councilmember Brown?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Assistant City Manager, for the presentation. I appreciate that. I just want to appreciate the work that the staff is doing. I recognize this has been a challenging year, and that some of this work has not proceeded at the rate that maybe some of us would have liked because of a fire, essentially. I want to recognize that, but I also want to just assert my commitment to continue to push you all to hire the equity director, manager position as quickly as you can, to continue to work with the members of the EDI task force who continue to meet informally, even though they are not a formal body, but are certainly important voices in our community, and to continue to push these efforts forward. So I think we have a lot to be proud of, given where we've come from. But I just appreciate that we can't wait, and we need to continue to work.
Councilmember Lay.
Yes, I'm going to have to try to get my mind around Assistant City Manager Hogan. Thank you for your work, as well as City Manager Durbin and Deputy City Manager Davis, who's been involved with this from the very beginning. I appreciate all the work that's gone into where we are so far. I, too, am concerned about the progress so far, I think as we all are, because we've had a lot on our plate. Staff has had a huge amount on plate, but it's hopefully going to be not too long before we get somebody who's in as a staff person. The only thing I would say, and I guess two things. One, I appreciate the group of, sort of subgroup, if you will, of the task force from last fall, who still are very much interested in putting in time and effort and meeting with council members and talking and calling and emailing and so forth, and I think that's really good. I hope that they continue that, because we can't count on that. It's not, they're really going way above and beyond what they have been asked to do, and I want to keep faith with that group and with the recommendations that they've proposed last year and we've been chipping away at. The only other thing is just, I think we need to temper, and I hope we will temper, and this is kind of my request to the city manager, that we temper our desire for speed in hiring somebody with getting it right. And by that, I'm really meaning it's a hard time of year to hire. There's just we are where we are, but I hope that to the extent we need to shift and maybe downshift to get the announcement out for the position, get more input, whatever, from that group or others, I hope you'll feel free to get it right, as close to right as we can. I'm reminded of the presentation, or the words of our moderator a couple of years ago, which is, we don't have to be perfect, but we do have to be excellent. And that's, I don't think that's trite at all. I think it's what we're hopefully going to accomplish, and I know you're up to it, and I appreciate all the work that you're doing. And City Manager, I know you have taken this up as a really important issue that the council has asked you to step up and do. So thanks.
Councilmember Dickinson.
Thanks. I'll try to keep it brief. I agree with everything everyone else has said. I'm really excited for the position. Having someone to go to, having a human that is the contact person for the community, for staff, for council, is a really big deal, I think. And so, getting this person on, and I agree. I don't imagine you guys will unnecessarily rush it. That this hire is important, and I hope we get it right. But it's for me, it's the beginning of so many of these other things, is to really have someone whose entire focus is this, and then they're working with the group that we have. And I know you guys have done so much work internally, but a lot of the community doesn't understand all of that. And you're one of the largest employers, the largest employer in the city of Louisville, one of the largest employers in the city of Louisville. So the work you guys are doing within your own institution is really important, because you're a huge employer, but also that interaction with the community and trying to do those other things that you guys are doing. So excited for this person, and thank you for all your work.
Thanks. Any members of the public care to comment on this agenda topic this evening? Seeing none, that takes us back to any other council discussion, questions and comments from folks? City Manager Durbin, are you looking for any other direction this evening?
No, thank you.
All right, thanks, everyone. That takes us to our next order of business this evening, which is, thank you very much, Emily. That takes us to our next order of business this evening, which is Resolution Number 44, Series 2022, a resolution approving a planned unit development amendment to allow construction of a new 2,824 square foot automotive service station and convenience store with 8 pump fueling stations and canopy at 525 McCaslin Boulevard. I'll open the public hearing and ask council members if there are any disclosures. I just have a few comments to make that are not officially disclosures, but just, so there were a number of legislative actions that occurred in the last month or so that we all participated in with the moratorium on automobile service stations in general that don't relate to this particular application, and they're legislative in nature. Just wanted to state for the record that I participated in conversations around gas stations broadly, but it doesn't impact my ability to consider a land use hearing in the judicial capacity that I will this evening. And within those judicial conversations, I talked to the owner of the property that'll be before us, but we limited our conversation to not talk about the application, but only to talk about the moratorium. And I talked to an applicant representing one of the folks on the gas station side, but again, not about the gas station or the application this evening, only about the moratorium. And I talked to several members of the community about the moratorium, but again, not about the application that's before us this evening, and limited the conversation to the moratorium. I just know that for some folks, the line between them is not bright and clear, and I just want to assure the community that it is bright and clear for me, and I'm able to consider legislative matters legislatively and judicial matters in a different light. So that is my disclosure. Any other comments from folks? Thanks. Seeing none, we'll turn it over to Ellie for a presentation. Great to see you.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, council members. My name's Ellie Hassan. This is actually my first in-person city council meeting, so nice to see all of you in person and not on a Zoom screen. Anyway, the item before you this evening is a PUD amendment for the property at 525 South McCaslin Boulevard. And this is a PUD amendment for, as the mayor did say, a gas station and fueling station with a convenience store and canopy. And the item was properly noticed per the municipal code requirements. And just to give a little bit of background on this item, it's located on the west side of McCaslin Boulevard between Centennial Parkway and Dillon Road. The site's about 1.5 acres in size and is zoned planned community commercial, and it's part of the Centennial Valley General Development Plan, which was established in 1983. And the existing PUD for the site, which is the Bank of Boulder Rite Aid PUD, was approved in 1997 and includes an existing structure on 525 McCaslin. And for the proposal, the applicants are proposing to demolish the existing structure and construct a new retail building with fuel pumps under a canopy. And access to the site is provided through McCaslin Boulevard on the right side here, or the east side of the site, and is accessed through public drives on there. Parking is also provided to the building on the east and south sides. And the building materials on here are primarily brick veneer, and there is some aluminum composite material or ACM metal on the upper portions, and there are textured metal caps. And the east elevation has some expansive storefront windows and emphasizes the entrance through the use of the red ACM panels and is surrounded by brick columns on either side. And if desired, we do have a physical material board that was submitted by the applicant that we can distribute if needed. And moving on to the tree protection for the site. So there are 10 mature trees that are proposed to be removed during construction of the proposed improvements. And these are indicated on this slide on red circles. And 2 of the trees that are being removed are along the McCaslin Boulevard frontage, but a majority of the trees along that area are being retained and help minimize the visual impact in drive aisles and parking areas of the development. And moving on to the landscape plan, the number of existing and proposed trees in the plan exceed the CDDSG requirements for some of the perimeter sides, and it also meets the parking lot landscaping, which helps offset the loss of some of the mature trees on the site. And there are plantings proposed on the west and north side of the proposed building, as well as in parking lot landscape islands shown throughout the site. And as a note, the stormwater detention is being retained on the east side of the property along an existing variable drainage easement. And as part of the resolution from Planning Commission, there was a condition to demonstrate compliance with the electric vehicle charging in the municipal code. So the site is a retail use, and given the 16 parking spaces proposed, they were required to have 1 EV installed space, 2 EV capable, and 2 EV ready spaces. The applicants proposed 2 EV installed, 2 EV capable, and 2 EV ready spaces, which are outlined on this slide using the legend. And staff analysis finds that the automotive service station is considered a permitted use in the Centennial Valley General Development Plan, which defers to the municipal code for its allowed uses. And the automotive service station use is listed as allowed in this section of the code and is subject to prescribed performance and design standards in section 17.72.130. And staff does find that the application is compliant with the PUD criteria in the municipal code and in the automotive service station standards mentioned previously. The project is compliant with the requirements in the CEDSG as well, and staff have found the proposal is consistent with the retail land use plan, which is seen in the comprehensive plan and the McCaslin small area plan. And based on this information, staff are recommending approval of Resolution 44, Series 2022, which approves a planned unit development amendment to allow for the construction of an automotive service station with fuel pumps and a canopy. And that does conclude the staff presentation. And from my understanding, we do also have an applicant presentation as well that will go after me.
Great, that'd be fantastic, please.
All right, let me. So yeah, if the applicants are here, they are welcome to present.
Evening, Mayor. Evening, City Council. My name is Jeff Weeder. I'm with Galloway and Company. We're at 5500 Greenwood Plaza Boulevard in Greenwood Village, Colorado 80111. Honestly, last time we came up with for the Planning Commission, Ellie did a great job, and we kind of ended up regurgitating a lot of what she already presented. And so to kind of avoid a lot of that, we'll go through this pretty quick. We can get to your questions that way. General location of the site here, located on McCaslin Boulevard. Again, infill redevelopment, no additional public infrastructure is needed to serve the site. No change in existing vehicle access to McCaslin or the adjacent roadway infrastructure. Mature landscaping on McCaslin's remaining, along with the detention pond that serves a large part of the overall development along that frontage is also remaining. And we are a convenience-based business, and the intention is to capture the traffic that's already moving southbound on McCaslin. You'll find, as is typical for fuel or convenience-based business, that people aren't doing U-turns or left turns to get to you. They're doing the right in, right out. Their mantras through the light and to the right, you know, and that holds true for this, right? The idea is to capture the southbound traffic. Just a little bit more on the site design here. You can kind of see how we try to graphically represent the landscaping, the existing landscaping, and how we shield the existing or the new fueling canopy and C-store from the public right-of-way. We have a pedestrian access that is connecting the public right-of-way to the existing overall development there on the south side, adjacent to the access drive that runs virtually east-west. Again, Ellie beat me to the punch here. Didn't see her presentation, so same thing. 2 EV spaces, 2 EV installed spaces, a couple of ready and a couple of capable spaces. One unit will sit there and it'll have 2 conductors, 2 hoses that'll feed to either of the parking spaces that are kind of bluish or purple in tint. Wanted to just give you a little peek at what it looks like there with the mature landscaping. Can't even really see the Rite Aid, existing Rite Aid building back there, and that's the intention, right? I think that's it. Again, we are permitted, we are allowed, and we are compliant and consistent. And I think that's the biggest noteworthy item here is that we are on every one of them. We're here for questions, so is the owner, or so is the client, and actually the landowner as well. So if you have any questions, we're here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we'll take public comment at this point. So we, Unless there's a question that needed to be answered. Sorry, I wasn't trying to. Great. We have a number of sign-up cards from folks that would want to comment on this agenda topic, and folks online as well can comment. If you go ahead and just click the raise hand icon at the bottom of the screen if you'd like to make comments, and then if you'd like to comment and you're in public, if you'll fill out a sign-up card, it helps us to make sure we spell your name right in the meeting minutes. And so just you can fill those out there right outside, and you can hand them to the city clerk. So first we have Josh Cooperman, and when people come up, they'll have 3 minutes to tell us what they'd like to tell us. Just tell us your name and the town you live in.
Sorry. Okay. Josh Cooperman. I live at 216 Griffith Street in Louisville. I hope that you had an opportunity to review my impassioned public comments from the Planning Commission's hearing on this application. Those comments may have come across as more of a tirade than I intended, but those comments accurately reflect how this application makes me feel. Absolutely furious. Fortunately for you, I've had a few weeks to cool off. I hope that you also had an opportunity to read my letter to City Council. In case you did not, let me now explain how this application fails to comply with Louisville's municipal code. A gasoline station is not a use by right, as was discussed here on the 1st of November. This application must meet the PUD criteria in Louisville's municipal code. I must respectfully and strongly disagree with city staff's finding that this application complies with all of the PUD criteria. In particular, the development application fails to comply with PUD criteria number 1 from section 17.28.10A, number 1, which states that the development must have an appropriate relationship to the surrounding area. First of all, there is a gasoline station and convenience store directly across the street. I would say this renders the Murphy Express's relationship inappropriate to its surroundings. Secondly, if we put another gasoline station there, it's going to severely impact the blocking pattern in the McCaslin corridor, which the comprehensive plan already says is lousy, and which I agree with. It'll be hard to redevelop as well. More regionally, I would say that this development does not have an appropriate relationship to the region because it will produce fugitive emissions, some of which are precursors of ground level ozone. And as we know, our region is a severe non-attainment region for that type of pollution. And lastly, I think it doesn't have an appropriate relationship to the rest of the world because it will prolong our transition away from fossil fuels. The development also fails to comply with PUD criteria number 1 from section 1728.10B, which says that the development shall be in accordance with the adopted elements of the comprehensive development plan of the city. I don't have time to go through, but in my letter, I made 8 different points about how it fails to comply with the comprehensive plan, most pointedly with a small area plan for the McCaslin corridor. That plan has 6 principles. I would say that this plan violates at least 4 of them. That's all the time I have. So I ask you to please reject this application.
Thank you for your comments. Next, we have Tess Welton. Tess, I'm sorry, I think I've said your name before, and I don't think that's what your name is, but I do think that's what's written here, so if you'll correct me.
It's Tess Weltzine, but that's
Thank you.
Hi, City Council members. Thank you for taking the time today to hear me and for serving our town. I'm here today instead of studying for the math test I have tomorrow because this means this much to me and climate change means this much to me. I'm here to talk about our actions as a town and the need for change to preserve our environment. We see each and every day the effects climate change is having on our planet. It's no longer a far-fetched thing, something we hear about occasionally. We are seeing it here in our hometown, and we're having to deal with the consequences of the warming planet. It is about a year marking the anniversary of the fires caused by climate change. With the Murphy Express, we are given two choices. You, as leaders, are given two choices. One, continue to use fossil fuels. Two, divert from these fuels. As a youth trying to grow up in this climate crisis, I hope you choose the second option. I want a family of my own and a clean world for my kids to live in. I know that Louisville is a small town in Colorado, and we have the whole world to change. But with each step we take, we are ensuring a cleaner future. We can make the air in our town cleaner, and we can become more cost-effective as we switch to renewables. With the gas prices continuing to go up, why are we building more stations? Our community continues to be supportive of bold, sustainable practices and policies. Your work as council has recognized the wishes of your constituents, and we hope that this continues. Please vote no on the Murphy Express gas station and on no new gas stations in Louisville. Let's do what we can for my generation's future and for a clean energy future. I hope that this inspires you to fight for my generation and for this town. I am calling on you. We can no longer avoid the climate crisis. Denial is not a policy. It is here, and we need to change. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Tilly Testa.
Hi, my name is Tilly Testa, and I'm from Boulder, Colorado. I'm here today because the construction of the Murphy Express gas station impacts more than just Louisville. It impacts every one of us. I'm against the construction of the Murphy Express gas station because it's a step away from the transition to renewables, and this is a necessary transition that we need to make. As Tess just said, the climate crisis is happening right here, and we can all see it in front of our eyes. The construction of this gas station is about so much more than just this one gas company. This is about our future. By building this gas station, it would communicate to me and other youth of my generation and generations to come that you don't care about our future. This gas station and whatever profits it may bring are not more important than our future and our kids and the life that we can have. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Molly, it may say Weber, sorry.
Hi, I'm Molly Weber and I'm from Boulder. I'm here because the construction of the Murphy Express gas station is something that not only affects Louisville residents, but everyone in Boulder County. I'm amazed that the choice to face climate change is still something we are unsure of. It makes sense that we are scared, that we will feel sad and hopeless sometimes, because the place the climate crisis is heading is terrifying. Maybe we are not always motivated to take action because sometimes it is hard to make the decisions we know to be best for the environment. We've had so many recent disasters that stem from climate change near our homes that the thought of these kind of events becoming the new normal is something easy to run away from. We see climate change as a threat, and our brain enacts the flight response, a normal and natural reaction. But climate change is not a predator we can escape, even if we run as fast as we can. In fact, the longer and harder we run, the larger this crisis looms over us, the more devastation it causes, and the harder it becomes to stop. I can't let myself think about the climate before going to bed because all the damage it has caused so close to my home is scary. I worry every day that we're not getting enough precipitation and another fire will scorch more of my state and destroy more of my friends' homes and even my own. I worry for all the countries that are being affected so much more than a landlocked state like Colorado. I worry for my future and if I will have the opportunities to explore the beautiful nature of a world that exists now. I worry for the chance that we will not prevent the world from warming 1.5 degrees Celsius, and I will spend the rest of my life regretting that I did not do enough, that we, all of us, did not do enough. When these worries engulf me, I either choose to distract myself from them or I take some sort of action. Because when we are facing times of hardship, despair, and hopelessness, we need concrete action. We need trust in one another and in our leaders. And because of the size of the threat causing our hardships, we need systematic change. The ban on creating gas stations in Louisville is a way we are creating this type of change. It is a divestment in fossil fuels and will help increase investment in renewables, both of which are essential to significantly lowering our carbon emissions. Additionally, this ban has the power to influence other places, to set an example for what the transition to renewables can look like at a local level. It does not make sense for the Murphy Express gas station to be an exception from this important change we have started. The way we are living right now is not working, but the problems with it are so ingrained in our lives that only change we make systematically altogether can save us. Thank you.
Thank you. Was there anyone that wanted to speak that didn't sign up or wanted to please come up, and if you'll fill out a sign-up card. Any folks online that wanted to speak? So right after, I called on.
Sorry.
Are you Emma?
Signed up.
Sorry, Emma Weber. And then Cindy's next. Sorry about that.
Hi, I'm Emma. I also live in Boulder, but I'm here because this affects everyone. I don't think you need me to enumerate the scientific reasons why Louisville doesn't need another gas station, because you are already educated on those. I'm here to represent the youth perspective on this issue. I debated over what to wear to this meeting, wondering if I should put my hair in the tuba braids of a child or wear makeup to make me look older. I don't know if I will appeal to you more as a scared and sad child or a passionate and outspoken teenager. I am both. I'm asking you to see us, the young people, as you make this decision. We see you and listen to your opinions. Do you see us? Do you watch us play sports in the 90-degree heat that catches us by surprise in June? Do you watch us breathe in the smoke as we walk to school in September? Do you watch us cry at the lack of snow in December? We do everything we can to demand what we deserve, but there are so many decisions we cannot make, such as this one. While we cannot vote in elections, and some of us cannot even fill up gas tanks, our opinions are strong, they are important, and we urge you to keep them in mind as you consider the Murphy Express. Of course, there are other sides to this decision, and I respect those sides. However, there will always be something else at stake when we decide whether or not to take action against the climate crisis. There will always be something else at stake when we decide whether or not to change. History shows us that almost every single time we have chosen to avoid that other consequence and in turn bear the brunt of climate change. Look at where that put us. Think of all the recent fires and climate disasters which we know stem from the carbon dioxide atmosphere that we've created. We cannot afford to continue delaying our action. Every time we do so, we are plunging ourselves further and further into a terrifying debt. A debt that many adults believe my generation will pay for. Yes, my generation will feel worse effects of climate change than older generations. But that doesn't mean my generation is the only one affected. The Marshall Fire makes this quite evident. It hurt all of us, no matter our age. Just because the climate crisis will affect my generation more than yours, it does not mean you are affected too little to care, to really care. And you are certainly not exempted from taking action. Please make this decision with not money or politics in mind, but the part of you that was burned in the Marshall Fire in mind. This is not a debt that my generation will pay for. This is a debt that we will all pay for right now, together. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Cindy Bedell.
Hi, my name is Cindy Bedell. I live at 662 West Willow Street, and I'm speaking to urge you do not approve this Murphy Express PUD. It's too big. It does not fit what's in our comp plan, which has a vision of small town character. 8 pumps is too big, plus a characterless standard convenience box will just turn us into, like any town USA, will look like the entrance of Broomfield. Secondly, removing 10 mature trees will exacerbate the climate impact of the additional fuel leakage and vapors, the car exhaust from the cars that are lined up waiting to use this, extra vehicle traffic, and the total of all the extra emissions this will cause. Also, the glare and the sky glow from a large 8 pump, open and lighted 24 hours a day at the entrance to our station is just of our town is just unacceptable. Last night, or on Tuesday night at Planning Commission, there was someone from North End that talked about there is absolutely no dark night sky in that section of South Boulder Road anymore. There's glare all night long from the King Soopers gas station and from the other businesses that are there. We could get a better plan for repurposing that building that would have less climate and visual degradation. We don't need any more gas stations in Louisville. We have the Conoco just up the street. We have King Soopers, we have Valero, and I think there's a new one on South 96 by that new industrial development. So in summary, I'm requesting you do not approve this plan. It does not fit our comp plan guiding vision of small town character, and it will degrade our town. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments on this agenda topic? Seeing none, that takes us back over for council discussion. And I'll start calling on people, but one question I'm going to ask is if there's a material board, so if that's something that requires getting. Any council comments or discussions? Councilmember Brown?
Thank you, Mayor. The first question that I have is how I know that the applicant has proposed some EV charging stations, EV ready, EV whatever. Can you go through the difference between the ones that are actually able to be used when they open and then the other ones?
So there would be 2 stations available at opening, so they'd be installed with actual chargers. We have 2 other categories. One is that you are wiring up to the spaces, but you don't have the charger installed, and the other one is to have conduit up to the space, but you don't necessarily have the wiring. But you have the electrical capacity in the box, and you can wire it at a future time.
Okay. And thank you, Director Zucchero. And under what circumstances would the applicant need to activate those other spaces? Would it be entirely up to the applicant?
It would be entirely up to the applicant. Nothing in our code compels someone to activate them at any time in the future.
Okay. And how do what the applicant is proposing compare to what was done in the previous gas station that we approved up on 96th?
Yeah, I believe they had 4 installed spaces is what they committed to and have installed.
Okay. Thank you.
Other folks? Mayor Pro Tem Maloney.
Thank you, Mayor. Could we put up the graphic from the presentation that sort of a schematic of it's a map really, like schematic of the building and so forth? Thank you. So I have a question about this. So my question is, it's not really clear to me of where the driveway in is and the driveway out. And my concern is when you have delivery vehicles, whether it be for fuel or for merchandise for the store, explain to me how that would work with the traffic that would coming in and out of here, because it seems like there's limited egress and ingress into this area.
Oh yeah, so compared to the Rite Aid PUD, that's the existing one, the access drives are staying in the same locations. The one over on this side is being, sorry, is my mouse visible on here?
Grab that.
Yeah, let me see if I can grab the laser pointer on here. Okay, is that visible?
Oh, I can see
Perfect.
that.
All right, there we go. Okay, so yeah, there's so these 2 drives are in pretty much the same locations as the existing PUD, so that has been existing circulation through the site. Granted, the overall site has been reconfigured a bit as far as there's multiple 2-way drive aisles. The applicants, from what we analyzed, it looks like they do have basically, if there's deliveries or fuel pump, or the fuel tanks are over on this side, the underground ones that fuel the gas station. The circulation intends to keep them separate from the general convenience store gas station users on this side. And as mentioned, the access drives are in similar locations to what has existed. And coming off of McCaslin, there is that existing private drive that goes around the site and a shared drive with the bank property over here.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.
Other folks have questions or comments? Councilmember Most.
I have a question. And I don't know whether you can answer this question or maybe Rob can answer this question, but a gas station is different than other types of businesses because a gas station emits toxic carcinogens. And I'm just wondering if we have anything, any limitations or any special rules for bringing in a business that has the potential to release carcinogens into the air. In fact, not the potential, does release toxic carcinogens in the air. And what rules we have in place to address that, to manage it, to limit it, to assess it.
So I don't think we have anything within our local codes, especially the zoning code. You know, a gas station is contemplated as an allowed use under performance standards that are written into the code. You know, my general understanding is that those types of issues are done at the state or federal level. There are regulations for gas stations, for emissions, for fuel tank safety and leakage. All that's done at the state and federal level. But I'm not aware of anything in our local ordinances addressing that.
Other questions from folks or comments? I have a number of questions. So could you show a color photo of like a rendering of the site for us again? I'm a little stuck on the CDDSG, the Development Design Guidelines and Standards, particularly when I look at the material board. I couldn't tell from the rendering here, and then I had it in the board itself. That red color just doesn't come across as muted in any way to me. So can you talk to me a little bit about your interpretation of that color red as a muted color?
Sure. So I have to look up the exact section, but in the CDDSG architectural guidelines, basically, I believe it's chapter 4, there are regulations for color that do contemplate muted colors for a majority of the building, but they do allow for an accent color. And when staff were evaluating this building, we actually had the applicants tone down the red quite a bit from the initial submittal. Originally, it was going over let me see if I can show it. There was red over this portion here, but staff did work with the applicant to bring it down to an amount of red that we felt would be considered under the accent portion for the CDDSG requirements for color.
Okay, and so the section I'm looking, if people are following along, is 4.5.1 on building materials in the CDDSG, and the first standard is exterior wall materials must be muted. So your interpretation was that is an accent. Thank you for the clarification on that. My next question is around the use of painted metal. I couldn't tell from the material board if the metal's anodized color or painted metal.
Oh, yeah. So for clarification, the metal that is used on the building is going to be painted. Initially, during the preliminary submittals before Planning Commission, there was just the anodized aluminum, but we've since asked the applicants to paint it a matte color.
Okay. So I don't know that we'll have 100% consensus, but in item H in that section of the CDDSG, it says painted metal and so on and so forth are not acceptable materials. So that's just something I'll flag as something that seems like a problem to me. And then I have a question about your interpretation just of the awning. I understand that in service stations, awnings are quite typical. Can you describe the lighting around that a bit? Is it backlit? Like, will there be lighting coming through the awning, or is it all straight down? Like, will any light be coming out horizontally through the awning?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I don't have a copy of the photometric plan available. It is in the staff packet. But in the photometric plan, the lighting that is proposed is all downlit, so there isn't any lighting on the sides of the canopy. It's all going to be on the bottom part going downwards.
So on the material board, which material is the side of the canopy, I guess is my question.
Oh, the side of the canopy is that painted metal that matches the one on the building facade, so it's the same as this material.
Thank you. And then just the description in the staff packet, of the applicant materials, not that it's the staff materials, but the description says, a textured metal is used in the cap outlining the roof of the building and creates a stucco-like texture. And so just in looking at the compliance with the CDDSG, I just wonder about how that is compliant when it continually talks about like large expanses of stucco will not be allowed. So creating this like stucco-like texture, I'm just curious about the interpretation on that.
Yeah, it was my understanding in the CDSG that I believe, and Director Zuccarello could clarify for me if needed. I believe stucco was a material that was permitted, but I just don't think they want large expanses of it, so they'd want it to be broken up.
So your interpretation was just that it was not a large amount of it.
Yeah, I think you're referring to 451H where it says large expanses of unarticulated stucco are not acceptable materials.
Yes.
Right. So yeah, I think we did find it was acceptable. And I think I would just mention that, staff's findings are recommended findings.
Sure.
And these non-measurable standards are open to interpretation. But yes, I think we felt like the materials met the general intent of the design standard in that case.
So just, can you point out with your pointer where those stucco-like areas are on this graphic? Is it everything that's tan?
It's the metal cap that runs the perimeter of the roof along this area.
Okay. Those are my questions about the Councilmember
Lay. I was just following up on that. What is that, the brown color that we're talking about? Okay. It's that little thin strip?
Yeah, that's correct, Councilmember. It's
okay.
The strip over here.
It's hard to see with that.
Oh, yeah.
It is thick. All right, good.
There we go. It's a little easier.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney.
I thank you for your questions. Mayor, could you give us that citation again? You went through it faster than I could hear it.
Sure. In the Commercial Development Design Guidelines and Standards, the main section I was referencing is 4.5.1 under building materials.
Thank you.
And I didn't list any of the guidelines, even though I don't feel that it complies with the guidelines either. I only looked at the standards.
Thank you for talking slower for me.
No problem. Any other folks have questions for staff or have any deliberation they'd like to work through? Or motions they'd like to propose? Or comments they would like to make? Councilmember Most.
Yeah, I have some concerns, I think, that were raised both in the Planning Commission and here during this public comment about the compliance with the actual specific intent of the comprehensive plan and the small area plan for McCaslin. Let me just bring this up. I've got too many things in front of my face here. And I think these are things quoted right out of the comprehensive plan, which is, creating forward-thinking development, preserving and enhancing the high quality of life, creating a healthy, vibrant, and sustainable economy. And I have serious questions about, given the state of climate change, given the direct impacts of climate change in this community. I think the latest estimates for the damage from the Marshall Fire are $2 billion. And our commitment to preserving ecological diversity. I don't think a gas station that emits carcinogens into the air is consistent with that. And I was looking at some of the articles that were sent to us by some of our community members, specifically looking at the level of emissions, carcinogenic emissions, that have been dramatically underestimated, and that could be as high as 10 times what they are considered, have been considered to be, and with standard setbacks of, I guess, 300 feet from schools or daycare centers or sensitive places. And I'm, when I look at that, when I think about the small area plan vision for the McCaslin corridor, as a multi-use part of our, redeveloped as a multi-use part of our community, I have grave concerns about committing to a gas station because that's going to limit what we can do around it. And if we take seriously the latest research about how dangerous and how much more extensive the emissions are, that approving this particular use then has dramatic impacts all around the area. And again, going to the notion that we have to consider by code that not only is it compliant with the comprehensive plan, but that it is consistent with, I'm trying to look for the language, an appropriate relationship to the surrounding area. And I just question whether or not that a gas station is, and the notion that was brought up in the Planning Commission that because there's a gas station across the street, therefore that means that this is an appropriate location, I would argue the opposite, which is, again, the research that was referenced in some of the letters that were sent to us demonstrates that the compounding impact of multiple gas stations has a rapid or a significant multiplier effect of the emissions. And I understand, as Director Socorro said, that that is not necessarily under our purview, but I do believe the other issues clearly stated in the small area plan and the comprehensive plan are, and I certainly feel comfortable contextualizing the potential impact of this particular business in the context of those other values and principles that we have clearly elucidated in the comprehensive plan and the small area plan.
Any other discussion, questions, comments from folks? Councilmember Dickinson.
Yeah, I'll just say, just want to thank everybody that has spoken today. Really appreciate the commitment and the passion to be engaged and participate. And you guys obviously have very bright futures in front of you, making a huge impact on our world. I think it is tough being up here when I feel the way you feel. I have no interest in a sixth gas station in our town, and I have no excitement about, I have an electric car, so I really have no interest in the gas station. What's hard for me is this is an application that seems to fit in this spot. If you're gonna put a gas station in the city of Louisville, McCaslin Boulevard near 36 is kind of where you design gas stations, as evidenced by the gas station right across the street. So it's a little difficult for me to have to analyze, in my opinion, analyze an application based on the criteria and seeing that it's compliant in all of these ways. And I think we can debate some of the other issues, but certainly, it's our job to apply the law fairly. And so when someone goes through the process of following all of our rules and applying to do something that's allowable in a space, and they go through the entire process over a year, and they get to the end and they're fully compliant on everything, it's very difficult for me to then take my own emotional desire for what I want and rule on a judicial topic based on how I feel. And so that's really difficult. It's a difficult part of what we do. I am seeing an application that were this for anything else, it's just sort of, there's not a whole lot to do here, from my opinion. And obviously there are people with different opinions, and that's great. That's why we have 7 of us. But my personal desire to have or not have a gas station, again, it's like, why are you going to put a restaurant right next to a restaurant? People have a right to do another one. And if there's a coffee shop on a corner, you can do another coffee shop. Like, I don't get it. And so you know, we act with our dollars and our behavior, and so I know I will be doing that, and I guess that's the end of my comments for this evening.
Thank you, Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the opportunity, and I appreciate Councilmember Dickinson's comments, although I disagree. I don't think that the applicant has met the criteria, and with respect to our excellent staff who do an excellent job, some of these questions are a matter of you know, a full understanding of the comprehensive plan and the small area plan. And in many cases, neither the comprehensive plan nor the small area plan fit with this particular application. Climate change it's a crisis, and expanding fossil fuel infrastructure is not going to help. Hundreds of Louisville families are displaced right now from their homes because of a climate change fueled fire, and I can't in good faith vote to approve this development. Under criteria 17.28.120B of the Louisville Code, PUDs and PUD amendments must be in accordance with the adopted elements of the comprehensive development plan of the city and in accordance with any adopted development design standards and guidelines. The sustainable practices, so one of the elements one of the visions that we have in the comprehensive plan is that we have sustainable practices for our economy, community, and the environment. And it specifically tasks us and our property owners and our business owners, our residents, our government, with having innovative, sustainable practices so that the needs of today are met without compromising the needs of future generations. You know, in 2022, a new gas station is not an innovative or sustainable practice. So it's hard for me to see how that fits with the comprehensive plan. I'm concerned that that is potentially compromising the needs of future generations. And it will not encourage folks to reduce their driving, or increase their walking, their biking, or switch to an electric vehicle, which are steps that are essential for us to take to combat climate change. And just to put a finer point on the sort of environmental crisis, you know, we talk a lot about climate change, which is a crisis, but it's also important to notice that our direct local environment is at risk from spills, right? If you go on CDLE's website, the division that regulates petroleum and gas stations, there have been a number of spills throughout the history of Louisville, some very recent, and we continue to live with the environmental impacts of those spills. Nationally, there are 450,000 brownfield sites in the United States, and approximately 1/2 of them are thought to be impacted by petroleum, much of it from leaking underground storage tanks at old gas stations. So if we put a new gas station, we're putting more of the environment at risk. There's more chance for leakage. I can't see how that's a sustainable thing. You know, the comprehensive plan tasks us with creating a balanced transportation system and ensuring that each user can walk and move in ways that will contribute to economic prosperity, public health, and the exceptional quality of life in the city. None of those things are met by adding another gas station, especially public health. As other members have mentioned, the ozone threat of a new gas station is real, and it creates significant public health and respiratory impacts for folks. The specific to the McCaslin corridor, the comprehensive plan says that future public and private investment is needed to transform this area from an auto-oriented suburban retail center into a walkable, mixed-use, transit-supportive urban center. Adding a gas station does nothing but add to the more auto-oriented suburban retail center. It does not create anything that makes it more walkable or mixed-use transit. There are a number of policies in the comprehensive plan that this just does not support. For example, introducing public gathering spaces. I don't see how a gas station is a public gathering space for anything other than just fueling your car, or supporting public art and amenities. None of those things are accomplished by this either. And I appreciate the commenters who mentioned that the McCaslin Small Area Plan also does not contemplate just adding another gas station. You know, these, again, enhancing bicycle and pedestrian connections is a key principle of the McCaslin Small Area Plan, and more cars are not going to do that. So, you know, the EV charging stations are underwhelming, and this is just the same old thing for this area. It's not consistent with our community values or the comprehensive plan, and I won't support it.
Other folks have comments? Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
Well, I agree with Councilor Dickinson. It's good we have 7 of us to deliberate this. And I think it's not simple because, you know, we've had a sustainability action plan in this city since 2016, which we all believe in. We also have municipal codes which define for our community what's allowable and what's not allowable. And I'm struck by the conversation that we want to apply rules that we haven't codified. If this is not an allowable use, I mean, this is why, you know, this council supported a moratorium on gas stations so that we could have a discussion about gas stations. But we should probably have a discussion about anything that has the impact to the climate, anything that creates greenhouse gases and so forth, and it needs to be codified, and it needs to be such that anybody who wants to build or develop in the city understands what's allowable. But you can't apply that in retrospect, in my opinion. You know, I look at this, and I value everybody's opinion, but when we look at the small area plan and the comp plan, I think you can interpret it many different ways, and I believe this is an allowable use. And it's hard for me to say, now it's not an allowable use because in the future, we're going to change our municipal code based upon a future discussion. And so that gives me great pause. And but it would be disingenuous for me to say that we don't all support doing things that make a difference for the climate. And whatever we decide tonight doesn't put us in one bucket or the other, because I think it's much more complicated than that. And I agree with Councilor Dickinson. You know, and we may be sort of prefacing our discussion we're going to have about what we do about the moratorium in the future, but how many do we need? How many gas stations does the city need? You know, apparently, you know, this developer says, yeah, it pencils out. This makes sense. We can make this work. Of course, that's their business. It's not our business. About business, you know, how many Indian restaurants we need, how many ice cream stores we need. Do we define all of those? We do for some sectors. We do for marijuana stores. We have a number. Should we have a number for gas stations? Potentially, but that's a different discussion than we're having tonight. What we have in front of us tonight, in my opinion, is an application, and we have to decide whether or not they're meeting the criteria. And, you know, I believe they do meet the criteria, and I want to hear more discussion here, but at this point, I'm willing to support this. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm not seeing a ton of hands. I have one more question, actually, that I didn't ask. Planner Hassan, on the application sheet, like the hearing request that got submitted, there's an X through the applicant name portion of it. Is there any significance to that, or is that novel in some way?
The applicant switched consultants halfway through the process.
Okay, and so the owner and the applicant have requested this hearing.
Yeah.
That person is just not associated with the program anymore.
That's correct. The original consultants are no longer with the program.
Thank you very much. So I'll add my comments and sort of thoughts. I really appreciate the discussion from folks. Whenever we have a use that people, every single use actually, people like and dislike. We get complaints about restaurants some people love it, something to do, music to listen to. Other people hate it, it's noisy, it smells bad. Every single use has, multiple perspectives. And so I try really hard to look at the code and what is required of us. And I try really hard to look at the externalities and if they've been properly mitigated as the code requires. And so with some of my questions, it was probably, apparent, and I'll hold the board up just so you can see what I was asking about. In the color photos in the work that we got, this red color just really stood out to me as not muted. And our requirements and our development design guidelines and standards are clear that we're using muted colors. So just like that, the highly reflective material stood out to me, not mitigated. The painted metal stood out to me. The use of glossy material stood out to me as all things that are not compliant with the commercial design guidelines and standards. And when I was looking through that, I took a pause and I said, well, I'm going to listen to the Planning Commission hearing. And they got into a really good discussion around parking and circulation. And I really appreciated one of the commissioner's comments that said, let's have this come back to us so we can see the final layout. And I guess I would just, if any of the planning commissioners happen to ever follow up and watch council, I would really encourage that second step, because I think the intent was like, we'll just have it follow the code and then it's going to be good and we don't need to see it again. But when I look at the layout of the EV spaces, I'm just not sure that now it can possibly meet our criteria under our PUD criteria, and I think more discussion could have fixed that. So to use a handicap, one of the required handicap parking spaces as an electric vehicle charging spaces, just I think creates a problem for circulation. So if you look at PUD criteria 2, like circulation and internal street circulation, separation, proper circulation in parking areas, if you are someone who needs a handicap accessible space and you've got somebody charging there, and particularly if it's not a fast charger, it's just going to take up one of those spaces that we really need for people who are experiencing the need to use those spaces. So I don't think that that's an appropriate location for it unless we add another handicap space so there's more accessibility for vans. So I would have loved to see the Planning Commission kind of deliberate over that more, look at those spaces, where we put those to make sure that there's adequate charging as is required by code, but that there's also adequate circulation and flow and accessibility for folks who need those handicap spaces. So just that type of thing I feel like wasn't really completely deliberated over. A lot of these things like the glossy material, those types of things, like it's solvable, right? Like it needs to just go back and have a discussion like that. To me, if I cannot find that this is a muted color, I just can't. That alone is hard for me. But I think things like that in the EV spaces, and even the point that Mayor Pro Tem Maloney brought up around the circulation and the way the trucks are going to come in and out, I do believe you're going to have landscape damage if we go with this design where you have trucks driving on that landscaping because there's not adequate access. Like I just don't see any way for most truck drivers to be able to. There are some that are amazing and they drive a Porsche or something, but most truck drivers I think are going to damage the landscaping. And so the flow for the fueling just doesn't seem done to me. So I don't find that it meets a number of the criteria in the CDDSG. I don't find that it meets PUD criteria 1 or 2 and several other PUD criteria. And I would encourage the Planning Commission to continue when they deliberate to know that we really do listen to them, and when they work through some of these things, it helps us a lot. Other folks? I'm coming back to you. I'm just seeing if there's anybody who hasn't commented yet. All right, Councilmember Dickinson.
I was just looking for clarification. I thought that the red didn't have to be muted. It was a accent piece, so that the building has to be muted, but then there can be an accent piece that is not muted, or is that red supposed to be a muted color?
So I think that's a question for us to answer. So I think
No, I'm trying to get clarification from what they said earlier.
So I did find the section in the CDDSG, and it's under section 4.5.2, section A, which does mention that a bright or primary color can also be appropriate for accent elements, such as door and window frames and architectural details, is the way the code words that. And it is a guideline rather than a that piece of it is listed as a guideline.
Okay. And then.
Will you read the standard also, just so I don't think everyone has access to the rules that we're trying to apply.
Sure, so the entirety of the section is do not use paints or other covering materials with unproven durability. And then the piece that is standard is do not use bright colors, including bright white that may streak, fade, or generate glare.
And then under A.
Sorry, turned off. So 45.1A is another section that Rob wanted me to read. It's that exterior wall materials must be muted. As such, matte textures are encouraged. And then the other pieces of that are guidelines, which mention, should I read the others? Which mention masonry, brick, stone, and stucco are strongly preferred. Textured concrete may also be considered, and that wood is appropriate in the context of similar adjacent development.
Okay, and then, yeah, this is a level of detail I'm not, I don't think is typical for us, but can I ask a question of, well, if you know the answer, but if not, the applicant can answer it. The handicap parking spot is doubling as a EV charging spot. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that is correct, and I believe there is a section in the EV charging requirements that does address accessible spaces. I'm not as familiar with the exact details of that section and would defer to the director.
I think we've been requiring accessible space when we have EV charging, that's included within the EV charging provided.
Wait, we're requiring a handicap space to be one of the EV charging spaces?
I believe so, yes. Because in case there's a need for electric charging for someone who has a handicap placard and needs to use that, they need to have access to EV charging. If all the EV charging were in non-accessible spaces, they wouldn't have an option or an opportunity.
Got it. So if I pull up, I can charge at an empty one, but if I cannot park, I cannot charge the handicap one unless it's the only one that's available.
You can't block the handicapped if you don't have a handicap placard, you can't block the handicap.
So I can't even park in there.
That's correct.
No matter what. So it is a dedicated charger for vehicles with handicap placards.
I believe that's the intent, yes.
And that's our intent.
Yes, and
Okay.
I'm looking through the code to try to find the specific
Can I just
requirement.
clarify my comment also?
Sure.
So the standards that were applied for electric vehicles by the staff are for a retail establishment, which is like your office, any retail. And so my comments were really about how it applies in the parking and circulation of this application of like this circumstance. I wasn't meaning to criticize the overall EV charging requirement, but what it does in terms of the the requirements that we have to follow for PUDs for circulation, if that makes sense. Like what it has done on top of the circulation for this. So I really wasn't talking about the building code requirement, just to clarify.
I don't know how the applicant can address it if they have to. Is there, well, okay. I guess those are my clarifying questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Councilmember Dickinson. The only other thing I had, you know, you make notes when people are talking and you try really hard to go through them all when you're talking. The only other thing that I had that I haven't brought up just was in PUD criteria, one with appropriate relationship to the surrounding area. You probably saw the staff response to my questions, or hopefully you saw them as their meeting material that was entered into the record. And one issue for me with this application with the appropriate relationship to the surrounding area is that when the GDP was approved for this area, school uses were not included in the development plan in this area. And since the city council has added schools as a special review, and we've seen that happen with other land uses where the school coming in impacts the ability to add a liquor store or a marijuana store or something like that. So I asked a question around the distancing and if there was some regulatory agency that was going to ensure there was some kind of safety with the distance between this preschool and this filling station. I know there are some types of federal loans that you can't get for homes if you have a filling station too close. So I just wondered if there was anything that would help to show evidence
that the school had an appropriate relationship to the service station, which wasn't contemplated in the initial GDP, and I just didn't get any evidence provided back to me from staff or the applicant that showed that that was an appropriate relationship between the two. The response I got was basically a lack of information and evidence, so that's something that I am also concerned with that we've not talked about this evening. Councilmember Lay?
Thank you. I guess first of all, thank you for everybody who's spoken tonight and provided materials, because there are a number of people who've written to us. I know Mr. Cooperman wrote a very long letter that I read, and others did the same, because this is a really, it's an important application, and like all applications are important, but this one has obviously some charge around it, so to speak. Right now, with the climate crisis that we're facing, I guess I had a question for staff. There has been some, I'm concerned a little bit about the comments that Councilmember Most made about carcinogens, and there were some comments that were made tonight about leakage that happens or emissions that flow from gas stations. Is there any information that you have anywhere that suggests that the application or the applicant has filed an application that is going to result in a gas station that is not compliant with CDPHE or EPA standards? Is there is there anything out there to suggest that?
Well, I would just say we haven't reviewed it against any of those state or federal standards. That's not something that we're looking for. We're reviewing against the zoning code and the design standards. Maybe that's a question for the applicant to address how they meet those standards, and they can explain how they meet those standards and the process for doing so. Might be illuminating.
I don't know whether the mayor, I would appreciate that. We're putting the applicant a little bit on the spot, but it's a gas station. I kind of figure if the applicant is wanting to put in a gas station, they probably have some answer.
I have not closed the public hearing, so ask away.
If the applicant is willing to address that, my question is, have you taken steps already to comply with the applicable state and federal standards in your planning? Have you incorporated those? Absolutely. Can you tell us a little bit?
Better?
Yeah, part of our thing here is, governments regulate different aspects of this process. We don't regulate everything. We regulate some things. This hearing is actually about our own standards, but there's been a question about health, right? That's a big thing, and some of the early comments are focusing on that, and it's one of the criteria. So, how are you addressing concerns that we would naturally have about emissions of gas into our local air? And
Yeah, so Murphy's fueling systems, they do and will comply with all federal applicable codes, all state applicable codes. It's governed through the Colorado Department of Labor, that we submit documents to them and they confirm compliance. From a technical perspective, the underground fuel tanks are double-walled fiberglass. The product piping that carries the product to the dispenser from the tanks are also double-walled, and all of those what they call interstitial spaces are monitored regularly with required sensors, so they understand if anything's making it into the interstitial space. well before it's making it into the soil. Air pollutants emissions, we file what's called an APEN that notifies the CDPHE about the planned throughput of the site. And then it's that the APENs are renewed or refreshed, I believe annually, based on use, the amount of fuel that goes out the door. So it's all fully permitted, it's all fully intended to meet and comply with the current guidelines. And in some ways, Murphy does exceed those with their setup, how they, the sumps underneath the dispensers they're enclosed and they capture anything that might spill out of the piping in those locations. Where the fuel drops from the tanker into the tanks is also an enclosed sump as well. So it's all very, very, I mean, Murphy doesn't want to pollute either. You know, they don't want to spill either. Does that answer your question?
I think so. While you're up there, just make sure if Councilmember Most has other questions, because I think that was.
Did you have a question for the applicant while he's up there? Because I want to make sure Councilmember Lay has a chance to go too.
Yeah, do you want to continue, Chris? Okay. So what happens when you close a gas station? What happens to the tanks and potential any damage to the ground? As Councilmember Brown mentioned, half the brownfield sites in the country are old gas stations, and your new business in town, everybody wants new businesses in town to be successful, but that's not always the case, and we've seen that along the McCaslin corridor. So what happens if 5 or 10 years from now, because of market factors, because of continued use of EV, it's no longer profitable? Who's responsible for cleaning up the tanks, pulling out the tanks, cleaning up the site, making it useful for a potential future business?
I believe the governance goes to the landowner at that time. So it's the applicable codes for any action after a closure is forced upon the landowner.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Councilmember Lee?
Yeah, I was looking back because we were talking a little bit about the comprehensive plan. And in particular, I think the small area plan is the more specific piece of it. It is effectively part of the comprehensive plan. And I know most of you don't have this in front of you because I didn't have it in front of me when I came in, but I have it now again. And there are a number of principles. This is, by the way, something that Mr. Cooperman wrote about, and I really appreciate that. But just to deal with the principles in that, there's a lot to the small area plan, and anybody who was involved in that process is probably getting post-traumatic stress, body memories right now from having gone through that whole process. But the mayor is smiling. She knows what I'm talking about. It was a challenge. But there are basically 6 principles. And I'll just tick them off real quick. Improve connectivity and accessibility while accommodating regional transportation needs. Another one is create public and private gathering spaces to meet the needs of residents, employees, and visitors. Another one is enhance bicycle and pedestrian connections to private and public uses. Another one is utilize policy and design to encourage desired uses to locate in the corridor and to facilitate the reuse or redevelopment of vacant buildings. The 5th is establish design regulations to ensure development closely reflects the community's vision for the corridor while accommodating creativity in design. And the final one is establish development regulations to meet the fiscal and economic goals of the city. And I guess my take on a number of these is they cut they cut either way. Clearly, some of them are really inapplicable. I think, and we've got to think about what's there now, too. Not just, I mean, it's not clear that there would be, for example, I don't know, a public and private gathering space to meet the needs of residents, employees, and visitors. You know, there are a variety of different kinds of uses of that spot. Could be a restaurant, could be a store, could be, you know, is this a gathering place? Not really, right? But what was there before isn't really a gathering space either. I mean, and there's nothing, certainly nothing wrong with that. But, and there's some that are, you know, more important. I don't know that this, the improving connectivity and accessibility, I was a little concerned about the mayor's comment, but now that I've gotten the clarification and we've gotten the information, it seems, I guess I'm satisfied that what's been done there with the EV charging stations, and you were actually expanding, it seems to me, the you know, the option for an accessible van or other vehicle that's used by somebody with a placard to be able to come in and use that. I think that's a good thing and positive, not a negative. There's the, you know, utilizing policy and design to encourage desired uses to locate in the corridor and to facilitate reuse. I think Councilmember Ramos talked about, you know, what's going to happen if it becomes something different. My understanding generally is the way that the newer tanks work is way different than the ones that are responsible for a lot of the brownfield pollution. Because it used to be, and this is dating me, but back in the early 90s when I was a young lawyer, there was a lot of work done on horrible, horrible tank failures at gas stations. And that has, I think, largely changed in more recent times, and they could literally lift the thing out. It's not a small issue, but it's not the kind of problem that we had with the previous really horrible kinds of tanks that were in there before. So I'm not too worried about the reuse of the space. Is it a desired use? Well, apparently the market suggests that it is desirable from a certain perspective, but as people have said, is that the kind of development that we want there? That's an open, you know, question, and I think that's one that we're debating tonight. I think that the vision for the corridor, which is one of the principles there, is it consistent with the vision for the corridor? How many trips, and this is a question for a Director of Planning and Community Development, Zaccaro, how many trips go either way on McCaslin per day? Do you remember?
I don't know off the top of my head. I could try to find some data.
Yeah, I mean, I know that there's more trips there than in, I think is it more or less than South Boulder Road and 42 or 42?
I don't know. I don't want to misspeak, so I'm going to try to find some data.
Fair enough. So anyway, I wanted to at least point out those to add to this discussion, because I think throwing those into the mix, I think there's probably there certainly is an economic argument to be made for putting it in there, but there are, you know, we have to balance that against the other values of whether, you know, we want this particular kind of business here. I think I would echo what Councilmember Dickinson said before, is that, you have to sort of imagine us up here in robes, because that's really what we're doing, is we're trying in our best way, and I think in good faith, all of us, to try to apply the standards that we've been given to the evidence that we have and decide whether the applicant has sufficiently demonstrated that they met the criteria. And this is not one of those where it's every factor goes one way or every factor goes the other. It's just not, it's never usually that way. But I think the findings of the staff on this are solid, and I think I'm probably going to, subject to what other folks have to say tonight, probably support this based on what we've seen so far.
Other folks have comments? Councilmember Fahey.
Thank you. Yes, I'm really torn on this issue also. I think everyone up here is. There is a huge climate issue in this problem. There are a couple of issues that I wanted to bring up. One is that when the McCaslin corridor was originally developed, there was another gas station and 7-Eleven almost diagonally across the street from where the proposal is currently. There are also benefits, I think, to having one on each side of McCaslin to cut down on the amount of driving that a driver has to do. You don't have to do a U-turn. You don't have to, do a left-hand turn, pausing and to get into it if it's on the correct side of the street for you, for the direction you're traveling. And as has been pointed out, we are here to enforce the codes and rules that we have in place. I know that we did put a moratorium on future gas station applications, but that exempted ones that were in the process. And so because this one is exempted from that moratorium and does meet all of the codes, it's, I feel, an obligation to let this go through, knowing that they are much more current and modern in their building, in their maintenance, in their safety. And the gas station is not going, in my opinion, the gas station will not increase the amount of gas sold at gas stations in Louisville. It's just where the car will go to get its gas. So I would also be in favor tonight of approving this application.
So I'm going to make a motion to try to frame the conversation, and then if I get a second, I'd just like a brief moment to speak on the motion, and maybe this isn't the way to go forward, but I'll try it. So I would move we remand this to Planning Commission.
I'll second that.
Thank you, just so we can debate the motion. So the reason I'm presenting this, I just feel very much like there's not a lot of, I don't feel heard. And a big part of what I try to do when we facilitate the discussion is just have everybody feel like their points were at least heard. If there was disagreement, that's fine. But just looking at the points that Planning Commissioner Hoffner brought up around the configuration of the vehicle charging spaces, like I feel very misunderstood. And I think there are elements of the application that if you want to approve it, you really need to ensure are adequate, so that we have good circulation and so that we have good use of materials and so that we have adequate parking. So the application that came in before there were electric vehicle charging stations had these 2 handicap spaces. Then we said, hey, you're going to have vehicle charging stations. It's required by code. Where are you going to put them? Then they put them in. They put, just as required by code, on one handicap space and one other space. So that eliminated one of the other convenience store handicap spaces from my perspective. And if you think about the way a convenience store works, people jump in and jump out. They're not sitting there all day. They're, it's convenient. And so to take that space as the charging space doesn't meet the requirements for their parking in this area. It just doesn't make any sense. It's an afterthought. It's tacked on. This is something through debate and dialogue and discussion between staff and the applicant, or planning commission and the applicant, it can get right. The same thing with the color boards. Like, these are things that should have been debated that were not. These are our requirements. These are our standards. I would love to have read a planning commission packet that was like, I think, what's the name of this color? Red. I wrote it down. If everybody else tells me that they think program red is muted, that's fine, we disagree. But I just cannot find that program red is muted. So I would love to just hear everybody say, I think program red is muted, and I don't, and then we disagree, and that's totally kosher. But I just feel like we're not debating the things that we're supposed to look at: the access, the circulation, the way the trucks are going to get in, the way the sidewalks are here, the way the planting relates to the boundary, the colors. This is exactly what we do through a PUD process. So I would recommend the Planning Commission take another look at this, look at the parking, the EV space in particular, look at the relationship to the school, see if there's anything that needs to be mitigated, look at the material board, see if it meets the CDDSG. So that's why I made the proposal that I did, and someone can make a substitute motion if they like. Yeah, anyone can make a comment on the motion. Councilmember Most.
So I think it's interesting what you're saying, and Mayor Stolzman, and I appreciate the fact that you are, your really deep understanding of the code and your willingness to dive in. And what the issue that it raises for me, and when I watched the Planning Commission video, I had some concerns because it seemed to me that there was a sense of urgency to get the proposal through the Planning Commission. And I feel like with what you're raising now, these kind of issues specifically are the reason we have this kind of land use proposal go through the Planning Commission, because they are specifically supposed to go through and make sure that the application meets the code before it comes to the City Council. And so it's, I think the points that you're making are really valid, and I think that this goes to our process. And I think that it's an important part of our process that we have a planning commission, and that this is their job, and that they do their job, and that I think it sends an important message. And I appreciate the comments of my fellow council members about having a process and having a process that applicants can rely on. And I think part of our responsibility as an entire city body in terms of that process is to apply our own rules and to set expectations that if applications come to the Planning Commission and there are questions about compliance, that their expectation is those are going to be worked out at the Planning Commission. And what I heard at the Planning Commission is, well, we'll just send this on and the City Council will work it out. And I don't think that's how the system ought to work. I think that process ought to be part of the applicant working with the staff and going back and forth to the Planning Commission, so these things aren't coming to the council, so that there are clear issues around how well they're complying with our basic standards. And I think it's really important that we do that, because it is that we do have to have a consistent process that people can rely on, and that process ought to be that the Planning Commission needs to understand that their role and what they should be making sure of before they send things to the City Council, so that we're not in this situation where we're trying to basically solve problems from the dais.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to make a substitution motion. Motion approving resolution number 44, series 2022.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion of the motion? Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it. I just wanted to just make a few comments, which is that, I really appreciate the conversation tonight. I remain disappointed in my colleagues. I don't think that this particular, I know there's been a lot of talk about applying the standards that we have and not the standards that we want. And while I appreciate that, I believe that applying the standards that we have leads one to necessarily to deny this application. I don't think that you need to go very far with the comprehensive plan. But I think it's also within keeping with this council that we don't tend to look at our comprehensive plan or really apply small area plans either. I've seen that on a number of occasions. So I appreciate everyone's comments. I also appreciate that we have different approaches and different ideas about this. Again, I'll be voting no.
Any other discussion on the motion? Councilmember Dickinson.
No one else has answered your question, but I do not think that is a muted color at all. It's very bright. My thinking is, again, that it's allowed as an accent, but I agree entirely it is not muted at all. So that's my confusion on that, is just that space. I really appreciate Councilmember Brown, I appreciate your passion, appreciate your position. I actually was quite moved by your comments earlier tonight. I think, approving a gas station, I don't know, less than a year ago, and not approving this one, that's, I think, yeah, like I said, I don't want a gas station, and I'm really excited to change the rules, and I hope that we do something like limit gas stations to, I don't know, 6 in Louisville. I don't want more gas stations. So the reason I'm voting yes on Mayor Pro Tem Maloney's motion is just because I believe it's the fair, equitable decision of applying our rules, and I totally appreciate that we disagree on that, and I like a lot of the points you made, and it's really hard for me because I think in your reading of some of our goals, I totally agree that, a gas station doesn't meet many of our goals. I don't know that we can hold every applicant responsible for meeting all of our goals on every application. But thank you for your comments, and I hope we can move forward with some new rules soon.
Councilmember Lay.
I did hear you on the color, and I'm not going to make the argument that the color red is muted, but I think the rule says that you can have an accent color. So, and I actually appreciate the way that the applicant modified that. This one is a fairly subdued. The whole station is pretty subdued as a matter of the colors that are being used, and I appreciate that because sometimes that can be quite a fight. I have no idea whether it was a fight to get to that point, but in any event, but I certainly heard all of your comments, Mayor, and I appreciate them, and I think that there's points on which we disagree on this particular one, but I think we can decide in the future what we want to do on gas stations and how we want to regulate them differently if we do. And that's a time or a topic for a different time, I think. But based on the rules that we have before us, and I think the criteria have been met, I'm going to be voting for the Mayor Pro Tem's motion.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney.
Thank you, Mayor. Looking at section 1720-170, it talks about the EV, or you probably were looking at it right now, Mayor. But I think what has been proposed is in accordance with this section. So I do understand your comment about the layout and accessibility and so forth. this is one of those things that's really hard to say there's an exact answer to it. When I look at this, I made a proposal that we approve this, but I think we have to very much consider in December when we talk about the work plan for 2023, things like this shouldn't be a surprise to us when it comes back to us if we believe it's not in accordance with our sustainability goals as a city. So one of the work plan items I think we should consider for next year is staff helping us identify these, and we make decisions if we need to make changes in our ordinances, in our municipal code, that's better in line with our sustainability goals going in the long term. Because there's probably other ones in there. And I guess the other thing, I'm taken back by some of the comments that suggest we can't have different interpretations of the same document. I have plenty of friends and we read books and we have very different interpretations from our perspective. What's important in the end is we respect perspectives, and whatever the vote is, and we support that going forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other folks have comments? I'll just add mine. I'll be voting against the motion this evening. I really appreciate Mayor Pro Tem Maloney, your final comments of interpreting things differently, and I think that's what it comes down to for me. The section you cited, just for example, on the electric vehicles, I think in trying to demonstrate how the applicant would comply with the charging requirements in the building code, they've actually made it so that it doesn't comply with PUD criteria 2 around circulation in parking areas. I know several folks have an electric vehicle. If you want to park in an electric vehicle charging station, you have to have an electric vehicle. You have to have the little sticker. So no other person with an accessible tag can park in that. It's just a very specific segment that we're trying to make sure in office buildings and retail settings that we're accommodating and that we have access for. But in doing that, we've taken away another section of the population. So I think it's something we could easily address. And we normally have these kinds of conversations and address these types of issues through the PUD process. But I feel like people are so afraid of using the rules and criteria to make the best application for the community. And I didn't suggest denial or coming back with I suggested fixing the application. I think we're so afraid of working through the process because this is a hot topic, because people are rightfully emotional about the other aspects of it. We got a lot of comments from people that don't pertain to the criteria and that don't pertain to the application. Really nicely written comments, but the weight of those comments was very low for me. And then we had other comments that was really about the criteria and the application and the merits of the proposal against our ordinances, and those carried more weight for me, as I noticed they did for most other council members in the comments that were made. And so I feel like this sense of fear and urgency related to some other legislative issues that we've taken up has unfortunately detracted from the conversation around the PUD analysis. And I'll try not to reiterate too many of the points, but I just, looking at the CDDSG, I disagree with the interpretation on the use of the wall materials. I would love for everyone to read section 4.5.1 before they go to bed tonight. I can, because I can't find that these things are followed here. And I mean, just to point out another one, I've spent a lot of time on the red, but I'll turn your attention to the brushed aluminum. If you look at the aluminum and then you look at D, highly reflective material, such as bright aluminum, are not permitted in the material. So I just feel like a lot of these things are things, you normally hear the Planning Commission going through and talking about the material board and whether it complies and this and that. And I feel like those steps were missed. I also feel like if you go back to the PUD criteria, that the applicant has failed to demonstrate an appropriate relationship to the surrounding area, especially with the addition of the preschool. If we think about other uses like a liquor store, a marijuana store, gas station, these types of things are uses in the area that are very common in the area, but with the school there, it creates additional things to think about and additional restrictions about whether it's appropriate or not. And boy, I just sure wouldn't have my nieces go to a preschool next to a gas station and play outside. And so I just question whether there's been adequate evidence demonstrated that it's appropriate.
And, I asked some questions around it and didn't get a response. So I'm really concerned about that one. And the circulation is really concerning, although I think it could be, actually, I think the first one could be mitigated too, perhaps, if there were evidence submitted by the applicant to show how they're mitigating the impacts to the preschool. So I just won't be voting for this. I think what we ought to do is remand it to the Planning Commission. And if you join me in voting no, we still have the opportunity to vote on that second motion that's pending. Any other discussion? All right, seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. I'll ask City Clerk Muth for a roll call vote on the motion.
Councilmember Most?
So the motion we're voting on is Mayor Pro Tem, the motion that we're discussing is Mayor Pro Tem Maloney's motion of approval.
Okay. Councilmember Most?
No.
Councilmember Fahey?
Yes.
Councilmember Dickinson?
Yes.
Mayor Stolzman?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
Yes.
Councilmember Brown?
No.
Councilmember Lay?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. It's 8 o'clock, so we'll take a 10-minute break. We'll be back at 8:10.
where the family whose kids get hospitalized. You know? So I was like, I don't want that to be our thing. You know?
All right.
Not recently. Just Thomas, Thomas was in the hospital back at the beginning of October.
I'm trying to say welcome back, but I want them to.
But I was just telling a story about how this friend of ours, the comment was, oh,
Just a minute.
oh, sorry.
Sorry, I was trying to let you wrap up. Welcome back.
Thank you.
I know. He'll tell you later. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. This takes us to our next agenda topic this evening, which is adoption of the 2023 budget, or that's what the city manager hopes it is. Just kidding. We've been working for a long time together on this. Thank you for all the work from staff, finance, all the finance committee members and community members who've provided input to this point. Sometimes it feels super anticlimactic when we get to this point in the budget process because we've had so many hearings from input from staff, input from public, that when we get to this point, it's kind of like, what else is there to say? But we'll turn it over to our city manager, Jeff Durbin, to tell us what else there is to say.
There's still a lot to say, actually.
Excellent.
Our interim finance director put together a lengthy and detailed PowerPoint presentation that she wanted to run through with you, but I think at this point, we're past that. And really, I would echo what the mayor said. This has been a very unusual budget process given the events of this year, and I can't express enough thanks to council members, to Megan Davis and Kevin Watson specifically, the finance team, all of our directors and their teams for all the work that's gone into this budget. It's been, when I started here, was talking to you a year ago, the financial position was very different than it is today. And so really this budget, I think, positions the city well. The proposed budget positions the city well, given where we're at today. It's conservative, but we need to be conservative. It allows us to protect and maintain our assets, our current assets, and levels of service and programs, while also focusing efforts on recovery. As we move forward into 2023, I'm confident that we'll be in a better position and we'll get the wheels back on the bus, so to speak, for a lot of projects that are still out there. So I look forward to that. Otherwise, if you have any questions, we're here for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll take up all of these at the same time. If any folks have questions on this agenda topic or comments they want to make. Any members of the public care to comment on the budget? Seeing no public comments, I'll take it back over for council comments and questions. Finance Committee Chair, would you like to make any comments?
I always like the microphone, thank you. Yeah, it's kind of anticlimactic at this point. We've spent many hours of meetings on the dais, in the Finance Committee, and a lot of discussions. And I will note in the staff report, there's essentially no changes since the October 18th meeting with the exception of some of the capital things in the Urban Renewal District. So I'm very satisfied with the budget we have here. I think there's a lot of questions, especially on the capital side when it comes with the impact of the Marshall Fire and the insurance and the reimbursements from FEMA. The dire side of that says, for me, we get to 2028, we may have no reserves in the general fund. So I hope that's not true. Of course, that's also based upon the fairly conservative sales tax figures, which we should stay conservative on. And now that we're starting to rebound back to 2019 numbers, I think that's a good thing. But with that, I could make a series of motions if you would like, Mayor.
Just want to see if there's any other comments from folks. Councilmember Dickinson.
Just as this is a pretty important document, there's a really meaningless mathematical typo on the Recreation Center Construction Fund page. It's okay. Just the numbers don't add up in the current estimate column, so you just want to.
Which page?
I don't know what page number. I'm on 23 of 156, so I'm on the hyperlink, but it's really not important. Anyways.
We'll fix that typo.
Yep, that's all.
The only question that I had that's still outstanding is just, so I know that the drone work that we discussed doing isn't capital, but I just wondered, is it in city manager's office? Is that where we put that?
Yeah. CMO or perhaps city council.
Okay,
We'd have to
in
look.
operational
It's-
expenditures.
Yeah,
Okay, I just want this on the meeting minutes so that it's clear that it's somewhere.
so, yes.
Right on. Any other questions from folks? The only, so since we're doing all, you want to go through all three that you're going to make motions on? So I should bring up my questions on the other ones now as well.
However you'd like to do it.
Okay, the only other, just let me, are we talking about fees right now or is that in the next one? Oh, on the consent agenda. Okay, the only other thing was related to fees that I made a note of related to the budget with fees, that earlier in the year, the council, we had a lot of public comment around the fees associated with building permit and the estimate, the way we estimate use tax with, we have an estimated value that we put in, and the public was distraught about the estimated value that we use because it was like $180 a foot or something like that for the minimum value we accept from builders. And there was some consensus at the time from council that we would increase that. You know, I think we would look at like the types of things that we saw coming in on applications to see what the market rate was. I see some confused people, so maybe I'll try to articulate this differently. People were upset about the number that we had for the use tax calculation, and we had said, okay, if that's way too low, we should raise that. So I don't know where that is in the process of getting evaluated and appropriately reflected, but when that is appropriate to adjust, we should adjust it.
Yeah, the confused look on my face is I was definitely aware of that conversation, and given the events in my life, I lost track of that. So I'll get back on that.
Okay, and we might need some more data. I don't know where it is, right? So it's just, it's not the most urgent thing, but it's something that as we adjust our fees and look at our revenues, like that will have an impact. So thanks. Take it away.
So we can do this, we're going to do three.
Three separate
Okay.
voice votes.
I make a motion to
Can
approve
we do-
resolution.
Actually, I said voice votes, but I don't think we can do a voice vote on this, so we'll do roll call votes, sorry.
Okay. Make a motion, we approve resolution number 45, series 2022.
Is there a second? City Clerk Muth, could we please have a roll call vote?
Mayor Stolzman?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
Yes.
Councilmember Most?
Yes.
Councilmember Brown?
Yes.
Councilmember Lay?
Yes.
Councilmember Dickinson?
Yes.
Councilmember Fahey?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. The motion carries. Next.
I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution number 46, series 2022.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? City Clerk Muth, could we please have a roll call vote on the motion?
Councilmember Fahey?
Yes.
Councilmember Most?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
Yes.
Councilmember Dickinson?
Yes.
Mayor Stolzman?
Yes.
Councilmember Lay?
Yes.
Councilmember Brown?
Yes.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution number 47, series 2022.
Second.
For Fahey seconds. Any discussion of the motion? Seeing none, City Clerk Muth, could we please have a roll call vote on the motion?
Mayor Stolzman?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
Yes.
Councilmember Lay?
Yes.
Councilmember Brown?
Yes.
Councilmember Most?
Yes.
Councilmember Dickinson?
Yes.
Councilmember Fahey?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Mayor, may I make one comment on the, but no?
Well, you,
I missed it. Okay, it's fine.
I just, so
I'll make it later.
you can make a comment. So the reason I hesitate is that it's really best to make your comments before we vote because you might
Absolutely.
say something that would have changed our mind.
Actually, I was going to make a comment on something that was on the consent agenda that I should have mentioned before.
Please tell us what you'd like to tell us.
Thank you very much. And what's on there is the Finance Committee actually reviewed the fees and charges, and that's something that's very important every year because historically, they were never changed from year to year. And so we actually looked at increases in those, but that's a very important part of this process. Thank you.
Thank you. And that takes us to our next agenda topic, which is ordinance number 1844, series 2022, an ordinance amending the Louisville Municipal Code to establish an exemption from the city's sales and use tax for carryout bag fees enacted by the state of Colorado. This is our second reading and public hearing. I'll open the public hearing, ask if there's any disclosures from folks. Seeing none, we'll have a staff presentation from the Assistant City Manager, Emily Hogan. Emily, I typed in your email the other day and I typed in Emily Crumpf. So just to add to the confusion,
That still comes to me, so you can use that
Excellent.
email address as well.
Excellent.
All right. Good evening again, Council. Staff is presenting ordinance number 1844, Series 2022, amending the Louisville Municipal Code to establish an exemption from the city's sales and use tax for the carry-out bag fees enacted by the state of Colorado on second reading. The state passed a carry-out bag fee of 10 cents per bag that goes into effect on January 1st. Last year, Council approved ordinance number 1814, Series 2021, which provides a credit toward the city's disposable bag tax, which is 25 cents per bag, in the amount of the state's carry-out bag fee, which is 10 cents per bag. Therefore, businesses will still only collect 25 cents per bag for those that are required to collect the state's bag fee, in addition to the city's bag tax. There are only 22 businesses in Louisville that will be required to collect the state's carry-out bag fee and the city's disposable bag tax, and those businesses, again, will have the credit applied, so they will still collect 25 cents per bag for customers. There are no businesses in Louisville that will be required to collect the state's carry-out bag fee, but not the city's tax. So no businesses in Louisville will collect the state fee. They will collect either both or just the city tax. The proposed ordinance would exempt any state carry-out bag fees collected locally from the city's sales tax. Earlier this year, the CML Sales Tax Simplification Committee discussed this issue, and municipalities shared concerns regarding the administrative burden of taxing the state's bag fee, as well as potential lawsuits related to taxing a fee. A model ordinance exempting the state's bag fee from the local sales tax was shared among participating municipalities, which is what is being presented tonight. If council adopts the ordinance, any state carry-out bag fees collected locally would be exempt from the city's sales tax. Council could also elect to not exempt the state carry-out bag fee from city sales tax, and local businesses would then be required to charge the city sales tax on any state carry-out bag fees collected. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions. We also have staff from Finance Department and City Attorney to assist.
Assistant City Manager, can I ask a question in the form of a statement that you can tell me if I'm correct or incorrect? And incorrect is perfectly fine. I asked a number of questions about this on first reading that staff responded back to me with. Thank you very much for all those, for all the help. So just the gist of this is that we want the 25 cents that the voters intended to stay 25 cents everywhere in town. And so we are not going to add an addition. It'll be 25 cents no matter where. We're doing the credit program. We've already established that on council. This will just make sure that we don't have to charge sales tax on the fee portion on top of the 25 cents. So it'll just keep everything at 25 cents.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for all of the information you sent me as well. I'm sometimes a slow study, so thank you. Councilmember Most.
So have we resolved, I know there were a few folks that had issues with their POS systems and being able to put a non-taxable item on, you know, on a charge for someone. Has that been worked out, or are those people still sort of floundering and trying to figure out how to do it? Because I know that, you know, again, it's not a big deal for me, but I went and, you know, I'm purchasing food and I'm like, yeah, they're taxing me on the 25 cents. I don't care, but I'm just wondering if that's been worked out, or that people are just doing it and it's ending up being taxable as well. I don't.
It's certainly a work in progress. We're focused on trying to help businesses get to compliance. We have a new half-time position, temporary position, potentially coming on board that's going to focus solely on back tax compliance and working with businesses to help them navigate those types of problems. So we're hoping to see increased compliance over the next 6 months.
Do we know what the current compliance rates are?
I don't have updated numbers for the most recent quarter, but where we were at after second quarter, I think we were around 30%, but that was in addition, we added a lot of new businesses that don't have a brick and mortar presence in Louisville, but maybe sell at the farmer's market. So we included a lot of additional new businesses, so that compliance rate dropped down. The previous quarter, I think we were around 50%.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions from folks on this one? Councilmember Dickinson.
Yeah, just making sure that we're doing a good job, I'm sure you are, with our outreach to all the businesses, making sure they know that they don't have to charge this extra thing and that they're comfortable with how this all works. I mean, I'm sure you're all doing that, but I know that that'll be good news for a lot of them, and some of them will think they have to charge the whole 35 and aren't really paying close attention, so thanks.
Not seeing any other questions. Any members of the public care to comment? We'll come back for more council discussion. Seeing none, any closing council member comments or motions? Oh, actually, this is an ordinance, so we'll have more public comment. Councilmember Brown?
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate this. I think this makes a lot of sense. I think taxing a fee doesn't make a ton of sense to me, so I appreciate the diligence here, and appreciate the CML's recommendation here.
Great. Any other members of the public care to comment? This is your final round of public comment on this agenda topic this evening. At some point, I might ask someone online just to raise their hand as a test to make sure it's working. But seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and ask for a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Most?
I motion that ordinance number 1844, an ordinance amending the Louisville Municipal Code to establish an exemption from the city sales and use tax for the carryout bag fees enacted by the state of Colorado, be passed.
Thank you. There's a motion to approve ordinance 1844. Is there a second?
Second.
Great. Any further discussion of the motion? Seeing none, I'll ask City Clerk Muth for a roll call vote on the motion.
Do you want to close the public hearing?
I think I slammed it down. I'll close the public hearing. I think I did before I had them make a motion, but we'll have to go back and watch the tape to find out.
Do I need to motion again? Or?
No.
Councilmember Fahey?
Yes.
Mayor Stolzman?
Yes.
Councilmember Lay?
Yes.
Councilmember Brown?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
Yes.
Councilmember Dickinson?
Yes.
Councilmember Most?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. The motion carries. That takes us to the next order of business this evening, which is Resolution 39, Series 2022, a resolution declaring the City of Louisville's decision to opt out of the Colorado Paid Family Medical Leave Insurance Program, FAMLY, as continued from 9/20/2022. We'll have a staff presentation from our Human Resources Director, Rhonda.
Hello. Thank you, Mayor Stolzman. So this is the second time we're in front of you about this family insurance program, and I wanted to just provide you with a little bit more text or context around the actual insurance program so you have a really clear understanding of it when I walk you through the rest of the information. But in November of 2020, Colorado voters approved a state-run family medical leave insurance program, and that's basically so that employees can get paid leave for up to 12 weeks for basically FMLA qualified events. And so that would be caring for a sick or a new child, caring for a sick spouse, caring for yourself if you're ill, and a variety of reasons that's going to be included in the packet. But local governments may decline all participation in the family program, and interested employees may still elect to participate in the program. And so there are three options in front of you tonight to vote on. The first option would be to opt out completely. That would be where council would decline participation by vote. If you guys do decline tonight, that would last for 8 years. However, the city could opt in at any time if we chose to, if the program was really running really well. Employees also may voluntarily participate in the program, even if the city does opt out. But they would need to register with the family division in order to pay their employee share of the premium and submit wage data each quarter, which could be done by the payroll or the pay stub that we provide them every 2 weeks as well. The city would continue to monitor the program and observe how the program develops and determine if we want to get in and participate in the future. And then the city can opt in again at any time. So that's option one. Option two would be to decline the employer participation, where council would decline participation and the city would pay no employer premium. However, we would assist the employees in their contributions by remitting employee contribution funds and reporting to the state each quarter. This would be a commitment of both the employee and the city for a 3-year time period, regardless of how well the program is doing. Then the third option is participate in the family program. No action would be needed tonight by council. This would require all employees of the city to participate. The city would participate in the program as well. And we would start taking out premiums from employees' paychecks in January of 2023, and the employees would not be able to get the benefit until January of 2024. And there is a minimum commitment to that program of 3 years as well for both employee and city. There are going to be a variety of ways that the city would be impacted. The first one would be financially. The city's currently not budgeted for this program. If the city were to pay the entire premium, the annual estimated cost could be approximately $154,000 for the first year. The second impact would be employee choice. Opting out or declining employer participation in the program allows employees to make a choice whether or not they would like to participate or not, and doesn't force anyone to contribute to the fund that would be opposed to it or that wouldn't get any value from it. And then the third impact would be the benefits. And so staff has, we have gotten together on multiple times and come up with some competitive leave programs. Well, we actually already have some competitive leave programs for employees at no cost that actually cover the same circumstances that the family insurance program covers. So some of those leave program or leave options that are available to full-time employees include paid personal leave, paid sick leave, and paid parental leave, as well as short-term disability and long-term disability. And these paid leaves cover this, again, the same circumstances that the family program covers, and part-time employees are currently receiving paid sick time. So due to the comprehensive nature of our existing paid leave programs and the cost of the family program and the allowance to give employees the option for direct individual participation, staff recommends that the city decline participation in this program at this time. Additionally, it will be beneficial for the city to just wait and see how the program develops, because we can actually opt in at any time. On page 3 of the portion of the document that I provided, you'll see a comparison of the family program versus the city proposed EIB program. And so I just wanted, the last time we were in front of you, you asked for us to put this side by side in comparison. And so I've done that, and I just wanted to tell you a few things that I think should be highlighted. The family program is run by the state. The EIB program, which is Employee Illness Bank, is provided by the city of Louisville at no cost. The cost to the employee through the family program is 0.45% of their wage. We provide that same benefit at zero cost to the employee. There's the reasons that they would take the leave are very similar. In fact, they're identical. The benefits, what we would propose for our EIB program is currently it's in use, it's able to be used after 1 year. We would move that to the 6-month time frame or the 180 days, so it would be identical to the family insurance program. Again, they're both leaves up to 12 weeks, but the wage replacement benefit in the family program is anywhere between 37% of their wages up to 90%. And the benefit from the city would equal 100% of their wage. And so there's quite a bit of a difference there. And then the benefit would cover, on there, it shows all of the different individuals that the benefit would cover. We would include grandparent, grandchild, and siblings to our EIB program so that it was almost identical to the family program. And those differences are shown there and highlighted in red. I think they're in red on your book. I don't know if that comes out in color for you guys. Also, you'll see that there are some calculations there between the differences between the EIB program and the difference and the EIB program. You also asked last time about some employee statistics, and so I did provide in the document the number of employees by employment status as of October. We've got 2 tiers of full-time employees, Tier 1 and Tier 2. We've got 196 employees. 223 variable employees, which are our part-time employees, and then seasonal intern and some temporary employees as well. I'll split out for you there. And then the next chart is on the average hours worked, and they're calculated from January to October in this year. We've got full-time, which is Tier 1 employees. They work between 36 and 40 hours. A Tier 2 full-time employee would work between 30 and 35 hours a week. And then we prorate the Tier 2 benefits for the Tier 2 full-time employees.
I'm just going to put a pause right here just for 1 second. I know there were a lot of questions the first time we talked about this around the distribution of employees, and so just so everybody's following on page 482 in the packet, you can see what we're talking about. And then I just wondered if there are any questions, because there were a lot of questions around this breakdown before, or if everybody's clear of how this is laid out in the table. I appreciate the table. It's really helpful. Councilmember Brown?
Thank you, Director. I appreciate that. And Mayor, thank you. I'm curious, so the EIB program would apply to Tier 1, Tier 2 full-time employees, as well as in your documents, the Tier 3 part-time employees. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So we're still not necessarily taking care of all of our part-time people. But the state's program applies to anybody who makes over $2,500 in a year. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. And I think there's probably more on coming in the presentation. Any other questions around? I wasn't trying to end the presentation.
No, that's
just
fine.
while we have this table up, find out if there were any other questions about the layout and how it works. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay.
Carry on.
So the city's going to propose providing benefits to a new tier of employees, which is the part-time Tier 3 employees. And those employees are the ones that work consistently 20 to 29 hours a week. On the following page, you'll see all of the proposed part-time benefits that we're going to be talking about. That would include providing medical, dental, and vision insurance to the Tier 3 employee. It would include providing them with paid time off, which would be prorated. They already get the paid sick leave, and that is in accordance with the Healthy Families and Workplace Act, and they get up to 48 hours a year of sick time. The extended illness bank, you'll see there, we just talked about that, and on the previous page talked about the similarities and the differences. We also are proposing that the Tier 3 employees get 2 floating holidays that they can use on their holiday of their choice. We're proposing that they also can participate in the deferred compensation, which is the participating in the Section 457 retirement plan, allowing them to have up to 20 hours of bereavement. Each would be granted to the Tier 3 employees. At this point, we would include them in the Employee Assistance Program as well. We're making some recommendations on including even more of the part-time employees in that EAP program, just due to the seriousness of mental health. We would also like to recommend that they are included in our employee appreciation events. They've not been included in that up to this point, and we feel like the ones that are consistently working 20 to 29 hours a week should be included in that. Also, the wellness program, we're looking at tuition assistance for them, as well as a recreation center membership and the Coal Creek Golf Course Golf Pass. So those are quite a bit those are all of the proposals that we're going to make for the benefits for the Tier 3 employees. Any questions on that?
Questions from folks? Not seeing any, thank you.
Okay. So there is that fiscal impact that would affect the city. Could be up to $154,000. But the recommendation is that staff recommends council consider this matter and adoption of Resolution 39, opting out of the participation in the Colorado Family and Medical Leave Insurance Program. And that concludes staff's presentation tonight.
Thank you so much. Any members of the public care to comment on this evening? We have a comment from the phone number ending in 8226. And now I know the hand raising function works. Thank you so much.
Good evening. This is Sherry Summer, 910 South Palisade Court. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Sorry. I would like to urge you, I'm kind of working on memory from the last meeting, but it seems to me that there was a possibility to opt in selectively to the state program. And I would like to urge you to opt in for employees who work less than 20 hours a week, or for whatever part-time employees are not being included. I think it's really important that all employees are seen as valued. And I can tell you, when I worked at the library, everyone at the circulation desk, none of them, even employees that work for years and years, did not have benefits. And there were people who worked less than 20 hours a week that worked really hard. And when COVID hit, the entire department was furloughed, except for like one or two people. And I really feel like it's important that every employee is valued and supported, because the people who work less than 20 hours a week are probably also making the least amount of money. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other public comments on this agenda topic? All right, seeing none, we'll take it over for council discussion. Thanks for those comments. Councilmember Brown?
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate this. And first of all, I just want to really appreciate the work that staff has done. I know I had a lot of critical comments. I noticed that your consultant is no longer with us, and I appreciate that. I don't think that that consultant did the city any services. And I also just appreciate the amount of additional information here. I know that city manager at the last meeting also mentioned that he wanted to work with staff and put together a package. And what I see here is a really positive step, which is that, there have been additional benefits that have been extended to part-time folks. And I think that's a really great thing. I think that, paid family leave is one of the first things that I started working on in the policy realm. And not to get too, nobody cares about my history, but it is something that is incredibly important to me, and I've been working on since graduate school, since before I had a real job, because I think it is one of the great failings of American society. And that's why I'm excited about, the voters' initiative that was passed in 2020, and that it's finally getting off the ground here, because it's going to mean a world of difference to so many people. I appreciate all of the information that's been provided. Given the information that I see, I still favor a situation where we can support all of our part-time workers. And I know there are other options other than just full opt-out. I think I said at the last meeting that I believe that full-time employees, given our packages of short-term and long-term disability and whatever else, can probably cobble together something that looks like paid family leave that would be provided by the state, or maybe even better. But I think it does leave even this proposal leaves some folks out. So I would be in favor of of helping our staff to opt in on their own, so that those folks could get the benefits. Does a 16-year-old who's working as a lifeguard, they may not want to work, may not want to opt in, but I do think that there would be a lot of our part-time folks who may work less than 20 hours a week who may want to opt in, and I think the least that we can do as a city is to provide for that option. So personally, I would favor option number 2, which isn't reflected in the resolution that's before us today. So those are my comments, and I'm happy to just really appreciate the work that's gone in, and but I want to stand by every worker that works here.
May I comment on that?
Sure thing.
The part-time employees that work less than, between 0 and 19 hours a week are not excluded from this program if the city opts out. They still may participate if they choose to do that independently by registering and submitting quarterly information to the state. That the city opting out does not exclude them at all from participating.
Yeah, thank you, Director. I appreciate that, and I'm aware of that. I also think that we as an employer have an obligation to help facilitate that. It can be very difficult and challenging to file quarterly reports. I think we can do our employees some service if we are helping them to sign up.
Thank you so much. I'll add my comments, just not seeing everyone jumping out at once. I really thank staff too for bringing this back. You answered all my questions, and great job. And the way you provided the information is incredibly helpful. And I really love the improvements for the what we're calling Tier 3 employees. And I think that the sentiment Councilmember Brown laid out is shared by everyone in this room, that we really want to provide work experience that shows how much we value all the employees. So I like that sentiment, and like that carries the day on where we're all coming from. I think that's what we said loud and clear last time. And I actually know every person in this room feels that way. So that's great news. And so it just gets hard to figure out exactly how to do that. So I was looking through the next steps, and really thankful for those. Because to me, the Tier 1 and 2 employees, there's no question, our benefits seem better, and it would be more expensive for them if we opted in. So it seems like for those employees, it's like they're going to be happy if we opt out. And then the Tier 3 employees, it looks like we've made a big improvement. And then, like Councilmember Brown talked about, the last group of employees, there's just this uncertainty of this new family program, right? Like, how easy is it to report? How good is it? How bad is it? And I think that's a lot of the reasons why staff's suggesting we opt out. So I was just going to add in maybe some additional things in the next steps that I think might be able to get us all to consensus. So in next step number 2, it says employees are notified within 30 days after the vote. So maybe in that notification for the employees that are not, for the part-time employees that work less than 20 hours, if we include information on how they can register so that they know that there's a process, so that it's not just like we're opting out, that we actually provide, like, here's how anyone can opt in, here's what the program is, this, that, and the other, so people understand that. And then we'll be registering with Family Online, just like it says in number 3. And then so I guess where I'm looking is in the 2023 timeframe, sometime after 4 and before 5 and 6, it seems like we need to evaluate the program in 2023 to kind of understand how's it going, because it says revisit participation in 2030, and I guess that's too long away, but it seems like in 2023 we need to see for the employees how many people opt in, and maybe we do a Survey Monkey that says to employees, how's it going, to the ones who have the ability to opt in. And then evaluate how hard it would be for us to do the reporting versus them. I think those are all unknowns. We just don't know because the program's not really created yet. So we don't know how much time we're going to spend reporting. We don't know how much time they're going to spend reporting. So I guess what I'm proposing is adding in a 4B that's sort of this check-in report back to council on how's it going, data back from the employees on how they think it's going for the group of employees that I guess we have heard some concerns about. And then just like some information on how much staff time it's taking to do the reporting, because we'll have some obligation to report to family, or maybe not.
No. If we opt out, we will not provide quarterly reports. All we
Okay.
need to do is register with the Family Insurance Division so that they know what the date is that we opt out, that puts the 8-year onto that they would then contact us again.
Yep.
However, we will continuously monitor that program to see how well it's doing. And so I like the idea of us putting that in there and reporting back to you. We can opt in at any
time.
year.
So that's my
If it's
whole point.
going well, we can opt in at any time.
Perfect segue. So that's so if we have this 4B of like a report back on how it's going, how the staff feel like it's going, so that council can use that information to determine if it's something to bring back to council to adjust at that time. So it's kind of a hybrid of what Councilmember Brown proposed, I think with the same intention of just really checking in and making sure we're looking out for all the employees. And then, but all the employees, because if we don't opt out, at least on that Tier 1 and Tier 2 employees, that's not going to be good for those employees. So that's my proposal anyway. Other folks have questions or comments? Mayor Pro Tem Maloney and then Councilmember Dickinson.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councilors Brown and the Mayor's comments. You know, I think all of our thoughts around this is making sure that our employees have appropriate benefits. And so Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3, I think we totally agree. And I understand where Councilor Brown is going. We want to make sure that all employees have the ability to be a part of the program. You know, just looking at those numbers there for the ones who work 1 to 19 hours, I wonder how many of them would opt in or looking for, and we don't know that. You know, there's probably a significant portion of those, you know, that have a significant other that has coverage or whatever, or they have another job, I don't know. But so, you know, I really appreciate where you're coming from, Councilor Brown, and I think that we need to stay in touch with that. And what the mayor is suggesting is that we check in on a yearly basis on that so we can make sure. You know, this is something that I personally voted for, to make sure that everyone has, you know, appropriate benefits, because I'm certain there's municipalities out there in the state where the benefits are terrible, you know, and this is helping fix that. It's not true in Louisville. We have pretty good benefits, and I would hope that they would always exceed the family program, or at least meet that. So I could support the staff's proposal on this with the modifications made by the mayor.
Thanks. Councilmember Dickinson was next, and then Councilmember Lay.
Yeah, I basically agree with everybody. It's really nice to see the benefits that we have, and I really appreciate the additions. And I guess I'm a little confused. Would any employee opt in 2023 when it's only the pay portion and not the benefit portion? Like, no one's gonna opt in until 2024 if they have the choice. Right?
Local government employees do not need to do anything until January of 2024. They may start paying at that point and start using the benefits. So there's no reason for anybody in 2023 to make any payment for a local government.
Yeah, well, squirrely. So I think that we'll have a little bit more time again, sort of checking in that part of my thinking is that the checking in is really going to be in 2024 when people are participating and receiving benefits, and how's that going? But I could imagine us kind of losing track of this issue. You won't, but it's of the moment right now, right? And so I would hope that as we get closer to January 2024, we're again reaching out to those 0 to 19 employees and saying, hey, this is your opportunity to sign up for this. It's both the payment and the benefit starting on January 1st. But yeah, otherwise I agree with the mayor's proposal.
Councilmember Lay.
Thank you for the extra work that you did on this, and I appreciate the presentation that you gave, and the side-by-side for me and for a lot of us, I think, is very, very helpful. And it also indicates to me just how good our benefits are, or partly. And I could support the staff proposal, but I think that the mayor's proposal, with that, I think is fine. I appreciate Councilmember Brown's concern. I think the good news from my standpoint that people can opt in, and that's a good thing. It's a safety net that is going to be there. We're making use of the safety net, I think, appropriately there. So I don't see the need to do anything more than what was proposed for the first 3 tiers, and making sure we just keep an eye closely on how it's going, and we're going to do that. So,
Does anybody care to make a motion? Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll make a motion that we approve resolution number 39, series 2022,
Is there a second?
with the edits
Additional
to the
council direction.
steps that the mayor proposed.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is it clear to the city manager what we're doing? Excellent. I got a thumbs up. Perfect. Any confusion from council members on what we're voting on? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Thank you, everyone. The motion carries. That takes us to our next agenda topic this evening. And so I asked folks a couple weeks ago or last week if we could put a topic on. So there are a number of different topics that community members and you all have talked to me about. And a lot of times what happens when you're the mayor is people think that there's a section of the role that doesn't exist, right? Like, I'm a member of council, and so as a body, we have to decide things. It's not like for the mayor to decide, even though in a strong mayor government, there were different obligations and rules. So when these questions have been coming up, I just thought, okay, let's just discuss this and clear the air for members of the community. So I've gotten a number of residency questions, I think in part because we put the board and commission applications out, so people were wondering, can I apply? What do I do? How do I say? And just a number of questions. And so at Councilmember Lay's suggestion, he thought a good way to go about this would just be to have the city attorney tell us about like what it is to be a resident, so that, then everyone's on the same page and has access to the same information. So City Attorney Kelly, if you wouldn't mind just kind of describing for council members and board and commission members what it is to be a resident.
Sure. And I think the question is not how do you establish residency, but rather, if a person is gone from their primary residence, even for an extended length of time, what does that mean? Are they still a resident? Do they cease to become a resident even if they, say, are temporarily living outside of the city? And courts have addressed that issue and found that the crux of the issue is the person's present intention to remain a resident. And that even if a person is away from their primary residence for an extended period of time, courts have found that if that person has the present intention of returning and of not giving up their residence, then they maintain their residency throughout, even while they're gone. A couple of things to think about is, voter registration. There was a bill passed in the legislature during the 2022 session in response to the Marshall Fire that clarified this for voter registration purposes and really codified what the courts have said for many years about residents in the context of qualification of municipal electors. So again, it's not directly pertaining to residents for a purpose of elected or appointed office in the city, but it does reflect what courts have said about elective and appointed offices. And this specifically, the statutes now state that if the residence of a person is destroyed or becomes uninhabitable due to a natural disaster or for any other reason, and the person has the present intention of returning, and that's the language that I think is really important, because that's what the courts have said in that specific language. then that person maintains their residency. And I think the present intention is key because that's something that can change over time. And that's okay. If somebody has a present intention of remaining a resident, they remain a resident. If at some point they change their mind, then they're no longer a resident. It doesn't mean that anything wrong happened during the period that they retained their residency, but the courts and now the legislature have recognized that that's something that can change over time.
Thank you.
Any questions
No,
at this
there
point?
might
I
be-
mean, I
there
can
might
go
be
on,
from other-
but
there might be from council members or members of the public, but I really appreciate having us all have equal footing and like equal information so that when members of the public ask questions or if people are watching the video and have questions that they have equal, background. So that's really helpful. Thank you for that. And thank you for the suggestion, Councilmember Lay. And so then the follow-on question that I've had from a number of folks is around board and commission applications on, well, how will we know? And I think, we ask in the application, I believe we ask if people are a resident. And so if we've really focused on being inclusive, and now these are my opinions now and not sort of the question I'm posing, but we've really focused on being inclusive. We've had members on our board that are residents of Louisville but are not citizens, so like they don't vote, they don't have voter registration. We've tried really hard to be as inclusive as we can be and encourage more diversity and inclusivity on our boards. And so I don't know what is appropriate to ask or how, if anything, we should establish residency. And I've just had some questions brought to my attention around that with applications. So I just don't know the answer to that. And I don't know what to tell people, and I don't know what you all think. So I was hoping we could talk about that. Is through the screening process, is there any more we need to do to determine if people are residents? If people are telling one another they have no intention of coming back, but then are telling us something different, do we have any obligation? And the answer may be no to everything. It's just something I can't answer on my own, but I hope we can as a group, and just establish it on the front end so that we're not bickering about it on the tail end with something in front of us in particular. That's my hope. And if folks don't want to talk about it, we can just dispense with this agenda topic. Councilmember Lay.
Yeah, I think that we have, I guess you asked a whole bunch of questions. I'm not sure which one. I'm not answering your questions necessarily, and maybe for Kathleen. Did you want answers to your questions before I say mine?
I am pondering some things within the agenda topic. If we need to come back with a future agenda item to clarify anything, if we need to set our rules more clearly, if we need to do anything to communicate with the public more clearly. I'm trying to be inclusive and transparent about this conversation so it doesn't happen after the fact and then create some kind of a calamity.
I think on the residents piece, the city attorney explained kind of the gist of things, and I appreciate that because I think that helps for us to know that in advance. I think to the extent that people are interested in challenging somebody's residence, there are ways of doing that. And maybe I would ask the city attorney to, if somebody in the public said, I don't think that person's a resident, somebody on council, what are the options for a person who believes that that's the case? What would they do? What's the remedy?
Well, speaking specifically for the mayor and members of the council, the charter does require that the residents be maintained throughout their term. And there is a procedure for charter and code violations, and the person would just need to follow that in terms of initiating a complaint. It would be evaluated. When the courts say it's, the primary focus is on the person's present intention to return to their primary residence within the city of Louisville, that doesn't mean that that present intention trumps objective evidence otherwise. You know, if there was somebody who sold their home in Louisville and moved somewhere else, and their voter registration was somewhere else, and their motor vehicle registration, you know, all of those pieces of information would be factors. So it's really hard to make that determination outside of that context of the facts.
Yeah, and I'm more interested in the process. Because to the extent that there are people out there who are concerned and are interested in, for whatever reason, based on whatever is going through their mind in terms of whether somebody is a resident or not.
Well, I'm not prepared this evening to instruct residents on how to file complaints against
Oh,
the city council.
I understand, but there's a process for doing that.
There's a process,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. And it's a process that's in the charter itself.
The charter and the city's municipal code.
Okay, all right. And I appreciate not leading people down that path. I just want to make sure that that's clear to people, that that's the kind of way that you can do this. And it's also possible to recall folks, right?
Recalling in the state of Colorado is available to voters for any reason or no reason at all. There doesn't need to be a reason.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good. That's good too.
Councilmember Lake, did you ask about board members also? I mean, I know we heard a lot about council members, but
I think, well, I was getting to that.
Okay.
I have a comment about the board piece. I think what we have right now is we're a little bit, you know, the barn door is open. I mean, people have submitted their applications. They've indicated that they are residents. And unless there's something that comes to our attention, I believe that we should not be asking the people who are applying for voluntary positions and who provided that information to us, we shouldn't be asking them anything about their residence. I just think that's, if there's a, you know, to me, that is, I think it's an insult, to be honest. And I think particularly with respect to folks who've been displaced by the fire, it's just re-traumatizing them. And I don't see any reason for doing that. And it sounds like, or it appears that Councilmember Most disagrees with me, and that's fine too. But I absolutely have a concern about that. And if there's some, you know, if there's some evidence somebody wants to put up about particular people, then that's their right, I think. But I guess that's a question. If, let's assume for a second that there's some concern, well, back up. Is there any legal requirement that we confirm with people who are applying for boards and commissions that their checkoff about residency is true and supported?
I think what you're asking me is there an obligation for the city to investigate the veracity of a person's application? And I would say no, there's not a legal obligation. The city, through its work with the EDI task force, did change its board and commission application so that it's just a checkbox for are you a resident? Residency is not required for all boards and commissions. And so, no, there's not a legal requirement to look behind the truth of that statement any more than there is to look behind, well, is this the person's real name?
Other folks have comments. Councilmember Dickinson, and then Most, and then Brown, and then Fahey, and then Mayor Pro Tem Maloney.
Thanks. Yeah, I think, you know, I'm thinking the EDI task force and our, you know, decision to intentionally, you know, open that up to people who aren't residents, because that was part of the conversation. I think I would be I could entertain a work plan item here of, do we want to revisit? I mean, I'm just thinking in my head, like if someone says, I would like to be a resident of Louisville and I can't. Like, it's my intention to be a resident here. Obviously, that wouldn't qualify for council, but maybe there are some boards, and you just said, some of our boards don't even require residency anyway. But I think that's an interesting conversation about, which boards is it really essential that someone lives here? And I know we have a difficulty filling some boards sometimes with the right kind of professionals. And so, would a Boulder County resident who's an expert in a field that we need on a board be a better member than a vacancy, right? But I mean, obviously, we're not going to make that decision tonight. But I'm really comforted to hear, and I hope that we're making it clear tonight and otherwise, especially to fire victims, that you are a resident. You can apply for boards and commissions. You can even apply for council. You are a resident until you put your house up for sale. Like, is that kind of a fair, like, if you put your house on the, well, maybe not put it on the market. If you sell your house, then you're no longer a resident unless you purchase another one or rent somewhere in town.
Yeah, I mean, I think you'd have to look at what are the facts. I don't think that there are some that are more obvious than others. I think a home sale is obvious, but it's hard to hypothesize about a set of facts that don't actually exist.
But I think to Chris's point, we're kind of trusting the applications, and then anyone, of course, a council member, but any member of the public can be like, wait, John's on the board? John lives in Boulder. How is he on the board? And then they can ask that to be investigated, and then that could be investigated. But we're not going to just investigate John's residency unless somebody calls that out. Obviously, I'm just using a random name. But that's my understanding, right, is we're basically going to trust applications, and if a complaint comes, we'll investigate that complaint.
Then we'll address it, yes.
Great.
And one thing I just want to make clear is that this present intention is for maintaining residence. You can't intend to become a resident. You can't aspire to be a resident and check the box that you're a resident. So just in case I was unclear about that.
Councilmember Most?
I don't think we should be hunting people down, but it clearly says, except as provided in some subsection D, each member of a board or commission shall be a resident of the city at the time of appointment and throughout the member's term. That's our rule, right? If we know that Bob lives in Boulder, or somebody's moving, or even if someone is displaced and they don't intend to return, they don't intend to rebuild their house or return to their community, they're not residents according to our rules, right? And if we want to change the rules, that's something altogether different. But I think it's really important, and again, I'm not saying we should go hunt people down, that's ridiculous, but if it comes to our attention that somebody has misrepresented their residency on an application for a board or commission, or, if I said I lived in Louisville and I lived in Lafayette, that's grounds for terminating my position. And I think we have to uphold our standards. And I don't think, I think, I don't think anybody's going after fire victims, right? I mean, I think there are fire victims who have clearly decided to rebuild and to come back to the city, and that's their intention. And there are other people who live somewhere else and have put their property up for sale.
Well, and I'm definitely not advocating for ignoring the charter requirement. I think if the facts are known, then we deal with that at the time that it comes to light. The question was asked, does the city council have a legal obligation to investigate or, look behind the representation of residency on the application? And I would say no to that.
Right, yeah.
Beyond that, I think it's up to the council to decide how you evaluate your board and commission appointments.
I'm not suggesting that we should be investigating people. But again, if someone raises an issue, if it becomes a question, I think we have an obligation to follow our charter and to do that in a way that is respectful, that is, not, intentionally invasive anyway, but sometimes that's simply asking someone a question. And it may be that for fire victims, that question may be, do you intend to move back to town? And I don't think the idea that is re-traumatizing someone, I think we have an obligation to uphold to our charter. And I'm not suggesting we should go out and grill anybody. I'm just saying that we have to uphold our own rules. If we're not upholding our own rules, then what does that say about us as a community? I think that's an issue, so.
Councilmember Brown?
Thank you, Mayor. My priority in this discussion is really just making sure that that folks who have been displaced by the fire through no fault of their own, know that we want them back, that we want them to continue to be a member of our community, and that we absolutely welcome their participation on boards and commissions. And so I'm glad that we can clarify that, and I think the comments from the city attorney tonight about, present intention to return are really important there, because they should clarify for folks that under no circumstances should a person who intends to return to our community, if you've been displaced and you intend to rebuild, you are a member of our community. You still reside here, and we want you back, and we want you on our commissions and our boards. So that's my intention, and I hope that everybody that is listening at home really hears that from us. A lot of this gets very technical, and I get that. But for me, it's about making sure that folks who have lost their homes know that they're still a part of our community, and we want them back.
Councilmember Fahey? Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
Thank you, Councilor Brown. You took the words out of my mouth, so that was well stated. Thank you. The other part, if you look at residency requirements for some of our boards and commissions, they're very clear. And we had a member of the Planning Commission who moved recently, notified us, and they vacated their spot. So I think what we have is working. And I appreciate the opportunity to provide the clarification for our citizens, and I think that was the intent of this agenda item, and I think we've done that, so thank you.
Great. So it sounds like there's pretty good consensus that we don't need to, now we have better public information available, so that's great. And we all are better informed to be able to inform the public when they ask us questions. And it sounds like there's not a real desire to do anything differently in the application process, but if information is presented to us, that people are meant to raise that at the point and make an issue of it. Is that what I heard from people? Like when information becomes apparent to council members, they're supposed to bring it forward? Or how are we going to handle that when information comes forward? Councilmember Lay?
I think there's still a question about whether people are going to be asked in connection with board and commission appointments. Some people are going to be asked questions about the residents. And my view of it is that that we shouldn't be asking those questions. If there is somebody that we have some information, and I have a hard time believing that we're not talking about specific people, but because I think that's what this is about. But pulling myself away from that for just a minute, I don't think it is our place in the boards and commission selection process to be doing that. I think if somebody is appointed and there is information, or if somebody has already, based on the rules we have right now, that some other person on council believes that somebody has misrepresented or lied about their residency, they should bring a complaint. They should not be interrogating somebody about their residency in the course of an interview to volunteer for the community that they live in. It's patently, in my view, and I'm getting a little bit righteous here, but It's like, it's patently ridiculous for somebody to be applying for a position on a board and commission, to fill out an application, sometimes to fill out extra parts of the application, and to check off a box saying they're a resident, and for us to grill them in the part as part of our process, because we are speculating about information that we've heard where we haven't. If a person on our council feels strongly enough about the evidence that might be available, they ought to complain about that person. And they ought to have enough gumption to write it down and have it go through a process where there's due process for the person who's being accused of a residency violation. It's just, this whole discussion, to me, is ridiculous. And I don't think anybody should be. I think what we're doing, unfortunately, let me just say one other thing. What we're doing is we've never done this. We have never done this. I've been on council 9 years, and we have never looked behind people's residency information. We're doing this for one reason and one reason only, which is that we have a fire. We had a fire last year, and we have fire survivors. And we're really going to change the whole policy based on that? I mean, seriously, think about what you're suggesting.
So, thanks, Councilmember Lee. I just would hope we can reset the conversation. I actually feel like there's not much disagreement among council members. And, I certainly wasn't intending on bringing forward a ridiculous, in quotes, to quote you, topic. There are conversations and questions, so I'm really actually finding this quite useful, that it sounds like there's a lot of consensus on how to proceed forward. We've gotten a lot of useful information. And the whole intention from my perspective of bringing it forward is to avoid some kind of an unnecessary confrontation of a volunteer. We just don't need that. And so, I feel like we're coming at this from very similar intention, but it obviously not communicating well with each other. So it seems like there was a lot of agreement that we'll take people's word, and then your proposal is that we should encourage people to file formal complaints about one another if they have information.
That would be my preference.
And so is that what folks want to do? I'm happy to have the group have that be what we move forward with. My question to Chris or to Councilmember Lay was just around what we would instruct community members if they're presenting information to you, or people are chattering or whatever.
What constitutes filing a complaint? That's what I guess, because the question you asked, the question that I heard you ask was, if one of us becomes aware of something, or a member of the community, what do you do? And so I don't know what filing a complaint means.
Particularly since they're not on a board or commission
Right,
yet.
that's I don't understand, so that's what I heard you say, is okay, so how would we handle that?
Right.
And filing a complaint, I don't know, what does that mean? We have a process for that?
City Clerk Neese.
So there is a process to remove a board or commission member. And the first step is any person who believes there's cause to remove a member of a city board or commission, as provided in this resolution, shall present the evidence of such cause to the city manager. So that's the first step. After that, there's a process involved that gives them their due process. And then the far end of it would be it comes to city council.
So we file a complaint with the city manager.
Correct.
Okay. Excellent. And so is that great with everyone, that that's the process we'll move forward with? Mayor Pro Tem Maloney.
I guess I aspire to a more kinder, gentler process. So, when I was on board of commissions, this came up occasionally, and I contacted the city clerk, who would call them and say, "Are you moving?" And generally they would say yes, and it would get resolved. No.
That would be the informal process prior to the formal process.
Right, so that worked in the past. I don't think we have a problem we're solving. You know, I think the clarification on residency tonight was something that it was important for us to hear at the same time and for our citizens to have the opportunity, there's 10 of them left, to hear at the same time as well, so.
Thank you, and thank you. I mean, that's my experience too, that we've actually had residency questions from time to time, and it's not a new topic, but so we've asked people in the past, and I understand why there's additional sensitivity, and like there's a lot of emotion around all the trauma from the fire, which is why we need to talk about this, because I'm hearing from people now that it's not appropriate to ask. We've always just asked. So now what I'm hearing that you all want me to do when someone complains to me is suggest someone file a formal complaint with the city manager instead of ask if they're a resident. So I'm not trying to be dull or dim. I genuinely want to represent like what we want to do with this and how we want to handle it collectively as a group so that it's not a surprise. And so I'm happy to carry forward whatever we collectively decide on. I just wanted to have a conversation about it. So I at least understand the various perspectives and know, okay, these are the potential pitfalls. So thank you at least for entertaining this to this point. And it looks like Councilmember Fahey wants to weigh in.
Thank you, yes. I have a particular perspective on this. And I would just like to do it in the way that would not offend the fire survivors, because we, being one myself, have gone through a lot. And to have another thing put on that we have to do this and we have to do that and we have to prove this and is just an unnecessary burden. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilmember Fahey. Councilmember Dickinson?
I think one good piece of information that I've gotten from this is, like, I was on the Historic Preservation Commission, and then I remodeled my house, and I was out of it for 2 years. Had I moved to Lafayette or otherwise, I may have assumed I'd lost my residency because I'm not living here anymore. And so I think it is good information for us to understand, like, oh no, like if you move to Lafayette while you're remodeling your house and your intention is to move back to that house, you can stay on these boards and commissions. You're still a part of our community just because you're temporarily dislocated, even if by choice. That, like, no, there's a story. And I think, to your point, Mayor, I think it would be a lot kinder to be able to have a conversation with somebody around, like, hey, so John, you know, someone wants to file a complaint, an official complaint. I'd love to avoid that. Are you intending to keep your residency here? Like, you know, have you left, but are you intending to stay? Like, oh no, I sold my house and I'm not staying. Like, okay, well, my understanding is if that's your intention, you probably need to step off the board. Like, well, I don't want to. Okay, then you can go back to that person and be like, you might have to file a complaint. And if they're like, oh no, I'm totally intending to come back, like, great, I'll let that person know. They're intending to come back. I don't believe them. Well, then you can file a complaint, I guess. But so, I mean, I think there is room for conversation, so certainly if you have relationships with people, to do it in a kind way. But I think in some ways, and maybe part of your frustration, Chris, is there's a lot to do about nothing. I think what we found out was we don't need to take any action today. The system's already set up pretty well that fire victims do get to maintain their residency if that's their intention. And that's great news. Even if they're living in Longmont, they can sit on the boards, as Cal was saying, and we need them very badly, so that's awesome.
Great. Everybody's feeling good?
So my question is, what's going to happen? I mean, you know, let me pose the specific situation. We get into an interview with somebody. Somebody feels like somebody who's being interviewed is not a resident. They've heard something out somewhere. Should they be asking about that in the course of the interview? I think that's a question for you all.
I think that's a great question. Any thoughts from folks? Mayor Pro Tem Maloney.
Well, it's on the application, so why not? It's not new information, it's just verifying information they've already provided. I can't see myself doing that. You know, I you know, I would trust if somebody says they're a resident and they provide an address, it's always easily verifiable. The city clerk wants to
We don't ask for
interrupt.
addresses anymore.
Oh, we
We
don't?
simply ask for the checkbox.
Okay. Well, they're attesting that they are a resident. That's good enough for me.
Answer would be no, we don't have to ask, right?
I don't think it adds anything to the process.
City Manager Durbin.
I would suggest that the process we have in place might be the process worth sticking to, that not necessarily be a complaint, excuse me, but a concern can be forwarded to the clerk's office, and between the clerk and myself, we can make one phone call to this person, not 7 or 10 or 20 different phone calls, which could be a lot for a person to have to go through. So one phone call, and then we can keep a list, and we can say definitively 20 calls to us, we've already checked that box, and they don't get 20 phone calls from a lot of different people. It just might be a little bit more humane approach to answering that question. That'd be my recommendation.
I think the only thing I would add to that, I'm not disagreeing with that necessarily, is I think though that staff needs to be recognizing that staff needs to be using the discretion not to be calling somebody just because somebody raises an issue. Somebody whispers in the back room to you or Meredith, oh, I think this person isn't a resident. I think I have a lot of confidence in staff's discretion on this. I have less confidence in when people want to manipulate a process. I mean, who knows what's out there? I don't know what people might call in with. I just don't want the whole thing to be a rumor mill that ends up, disrupting people for no real objective purpose than to be harassing them. And I trust that you guys can make the distinction between somebody calling in and just saying, well, I've heard that this person isn't a resident, and that's probably not enough to make a call. Yeah, you'll have, this is not what council is doing. It's a staff function. But I'm just concerned that it ends up being sort of rumor and innuendo, and the staff feels like, oh, we have to call that person and ask because somebody's made some gossamer allegation that's not supported by any objective evidence. I think there needs to be some sort of objective evidence that would lead you to make a call like that. That would be my preference.
Okay, thank you very much. It does make me recognize that, at least I feel like I wasn't the only person who felt like there's a lot on this topic and it's complex and complicated. So thank you for the discussion. I really appreciate it. I'm not sure we've totally resolved everything, but I think we've had some good discussion, at least about what the current process is, gotten on a basis of understanding of how things might go, and it might end up being something we have to talk about again. So I'll let another person bring it up next time. And thank you. I appreciate trying to get ahead of it so that it doesn't create a problem or we don't want to traumatize anyone, like Councilmember Brown said, and how we can be proactive about that, I think, is really important. So the other piece of the agenda topic is also on the issue of proactive. We've taken, I don't know, Meredith, how many times we've talked about our electronic meeting rules since we've put them in place with the pandemic. But I don't feel like we've really talked about virtual meetings and I really feel like we've talked about the rules in the context of the pandemic and not sort of how we want the rules to serve the community in the context of just virtual meetings. And whether it's a virtual meeting or whether it's a hybrid meeting or an in-person meeting with virtual attendance. And there's been some community chatter around this topic as well that I don't feel that it's appropriate for the mayor to decide or, answer or know about. I know what our existing rules are,
And I know what we've talked about to this point, but I think it might be worth having a future meeting to talk about, what, for example, in, I think it's North Glen, but it might be Thornton. I apologize to whichever city it's not. They've had a member who works remotely that has a job in another state, and it's caused a lot of community dialogue and finger pointing, and I think it's like along the lines of what Councilmember Lay is saying, that it's like manipulation, people trying to manipulate outcomes in system based on this rules instead of like actual content or merit. And so I feel like getting ahead of this and talking about what we want for attendance and what we want for remote participation and in-person participation outside the context of the pandemic. Because I really feel like the context that we've changed our meeting rules to this point have all been to ensure that we can be safe with one another and the public, to be respectful to one another and the public with spreading disease. And I just don't know that I feel like we've had a big conversation around the new reality of how people participate in work and life, and what that means for attendance and participation and things like that. So I just wonder if council wants to have a discussion about that at a future date. So that was the only point of this second part, was just to see if that's something people are interested in talking about or not. And just know that the community is talking about it, whether we want to talk about it or not. Councilmember Dickinson.
Yeah, I think it's been fantastic. I was up in Winter Park this morning, and I was like, ooh, depending on the weather, I'm in, and I was like, but I'll be okay. Like, I can open up my computer and I can join the meeting. I know a lot of us have done that from different places, and I think more importantly that residents have found a way to tie in and engage more easily. So I think the change has been really wonderful for engagement, and I can't think of how many meetings we would have missed collectively. And I almost didn't come because I have this like lingering cold from 2 weeks ago. And I'm like, I could just do this from my house instead and not bring my old cold here. So I think it's been a really wonderful addition to our process, and has allowed for people to participate in lots of different ways. So happy to have a bigger, longer conversation about it at some other point. But that's my 2 cents, is that it's been a net win for engagement and participation.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney.
Well, I mean, I agree with the initial intent, and I think also, we had members who had COVID recently, and they're going to have other things, right? Some of us will have, hopefully not, but RSV or whatever it might be. It's sort of a new world of diseases, but being able to have that ability to still participate, or for traveling and being able to participate. I did that once this last year. If we want to open this topic up, I think it should be part of our discussion about the work plan for 2023, because that could be a lengthy discussion, especially if you get into various iterations of this or that. I like the rules that we have now, because technology generally works. If we had problems with technology, and I see some of the meetings that some of our commissions are having meetings, and they have people remote for various reasons. But if the technology didn't work, they wouldn't have a quorum, and that can be an issue. So I think that there's so many pieces to this, that if we want to do something, it should be a priority for a work plan item for 2023, and we should add it to our discussion items for whatever the middle of December is.
Are folks okay, just given the hour and the heat of the night, are folks okay with giving staff direction to throw it in the mix and then see if it makes its way through the gauntlet of the work planning process? I see a lot of nodding and some people just done, which makes me think it was a really good suggestion to move it along. Is that okay? Excellent. So the nods have it. And are there any other things folks want to talk about this evening? All right, seeing none, that's great. That takes us to ordinance number 1845 Series 2022, an ordinance amending Chapter 15.18.030 of the Louisville Municipal Code concerning amendments and deletions to the 2021 International
Energy Conservation Code to include requirements for commercial energy use, intensity performance targets, and restrictions of fossil fuel space and water heating equipment. This is our first reading, and we'll set the public hearing for December 6, 2022. I'll move that we approve this first reading. Is there a second?
Second, and I'm impressed by how quickly you can read.
Thanks. Any discussion of this? I guess I'll just ask on second reading when it comes back, if it just includes, I know staff, this took extra time, an extra year, so we could do public outreach on commercial codes in general and other things. And so if you could just include the public outreach that was done, given the nature of the public comments this evening. Any other things that we need on second reading? Thanks. All those in favor, please say aye. I guess we should vote on it. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, everyone. That takes us to our city attorney's report.
I have no report. Thank you, Mayor.
Any council comments, committee reports, and identification of future agenda items? Councilmember Brown.
I just wanted to update folks. I attended the, actually, Councilmember Most and I attended the airport roundtable, noise roundtable on Monday. Westminster has rejoined the roundtable. I think we were able to move forward on approving language for an RFP that will bring on a specific consultant to make recommendations, including new recommendations about flight paths in and out of the airport, which may be helpful. I think I was disappointed that the flight, that the pilot program that they had tried to work on with the flight schools and others, to have some of these voluntary paths in and out of the airport didn't seem to have, at least in the initial efforts, didn't seem to have a lot of buy-in from either the air traffic control tower or from the flight schools, and the noise complaints were no different from 1 month to the next. I appreciate the airport working with us, but I think it's going to take a lot more buy-in from the flight schools and their efforts. We got a long ways to go. So we continue to work with them. I think there's, I'm glad to have Westminster back at the table, and we'll continue to, I'm hopeful that getting a consultant on will help us. So.
Any other committee reports? Councilmember Dickinson.
Just a reminder, the EVC is meeting this Friday at 1:30. We only meet once a month, so, you know, if anyone wants to attend, love to have you there. And then just my final reminder, I can't remind you again, that this Saturday at noon is the Fire versus Police Dodgeball First Responder Appreciation event. It'll be fun to see a lot of you down there. Should be a really great time.
Thank you. Any other committee reports? At Dr. Cog, Denver Regional Council of Governments, we're still in the TIP allocation process. We're in round 3 right now, but we're going to be meeting at 8 a.m. on Thursday to decide on the review criteria for round 4. The proposal is to do it just like round 2. So it seems fine that the proposal has every staff member from the agency. So Megan from our agency reviews everyone else's proposals, but not our own. And then they get normed. So like if Megan is a really critical reviewer or a really easy reviewer, they get normed to some median for their reviewing style and then put into the hopper against all the other projects. It's a great process because the staff understand the projects, the corridors, and our community values around Vision Zero and emissions reductions and transit, and so it's a great process. The only downside to it is that it uses a lot of staff resources, so thank you to Megan and thank you to the staff from the other communities for all that effort, because it is no easy feat to review all of those different projects. So everybody should bring Megan chocolate. And for Metro Mayor's Caucus, the caucus is really, and actually Dr. Cog have taken a focus on homelessness, on people experiencing homelessness, I should say. And so I'm heartened that it looks like there's going to be a lot more regional collaboration on the issue, and it's a regional problem, so that's great. Not a lot of definitive actions, but a lot of seeming momentum toward consensus that we need to work together, which is a really important first step. So that's great. And at Northwest MCC, we had a meeting and we talked about what is our collective vision for transit in the county. because we were all kind of employing tactics without talking about what the overall strategy was and how it related to our vision. And so what it seemed like was happening is that some of the tactics, from some people's perspectives like mine, were counterproductive to what our overall vision was. And like we weren't restoring service to critical routes like the FF2, FF4, LX, and some of the routes that really carry a lot of commuters. So we had a great meeting with RTD, and they talked about their system optimization plan. And it was a really great meeting, getting everybody kind of on the same page, realizing, okay, this is a zero-sum game. And if we put this route here, it means that this route's not going here. And we only have so many drivers. And right now, we are short. Any guesses on how many drivers we're short? Anyone? 1,000? Okay, Dennis is not optimistic. It's 500. So we're doing better than Mayor Pro Tem Maloney thought, but it's still a lot of drivers, 500. And so it's not going to be a quick recovery. And it's not just that's the RTD number. That doesn't include the shortage for our county who provides services, or VIA who provides services, or the school district who provides services, or the airport who. So we actually have a big regional problem in this area. So keep your eye out on that, and we'll keep participating in those regional forums to try to make the best of it. Anything else from folks? All right, seeing none, we're adjourned.